Prepare to be stunned. America was gripped by the love triangle tragedy of Sabrina and Robert Lyman and Jonathan Hunter, a deadly tale of lust, betrayal, hidden truths, and a deadly scheme that sealed Robert's fate. Sabrina and Robert Lyman seemed to have it. 2 kids, a happy facade.
What is meant by that?
It was usually Sabrina and I, and then we would go have sex with our husbands.
And Jason,
Yes.
when that was done, you would go to separate locations.
Well, in the same room, but not together, yeah.
But the truth is that in secret, their marriage turned dark as they began embracing a swinging lifestyle. And it's amongst all this that Sabrina met Jonathan Hearn, a fiery young firefighter, igniting a passionate affair. And it was at this point that a sinister scheme to end Robert's life began to unfold. A tale that rattled the small American town of Silver Lakes, exposing the treacherous web woven by lust and lies. A grim love triangle that serves as a haunting reminder of how desire's grip can drive people to unspeakable ends, and the shocking, the ruin that such choices can bring.
Felt like, I felt like this is a very way, but yet I continued. There's really no explanation for my behavior as far as that goes. Now that I see it like this, it's almost like talking and
So let's set the scene. In the case of Sabrina and Robert Lyman, they appear to have that perfect Hollywood version of the ideal life. The 2 kids, a beautiful home. They were pillars in their community. You know, that proper traditional American as apple pie nonsense that we were fed growing up as kids. You know the stuff, the white picket fences and all of that nonsense. Well, Robert and Sabrina's life shimmered with apparent perfection. There were parties, barbecues, boating, a canvas of happiness. Robbie and Leanna, their 2 children, cherished jewels within their lives. Robert was a mechanic. Sabrina had her part-time role. They were pillars of stability behind closed doors, however. Their marriage was far from traditional. So Sabrina and Robert decided they wanted to explore the world of swinging, opening up their marriage and everything else to sexual relationships with other couples. So they attended parties turned to orgies, and they even swapped partners with friends. This unconventional lifestyle seemed to bring excitement and fulfillment to their lives. So as they delved a little deeper into the swinging scene, they also began to introduce alcohol into their encounters. Apparently, many people use alcohol as a way to relax and engage in activities that they wouldn't normally consider.
Now, why were you drinking so much after the sacred bond with Robert was broken?
Well, that's how we functioned. I would not have behaved the way that I behaved and done the things that I had done without being under the influence, for sure.
So you were covering the pain.
At the time, I didn't realize it, but over time, I definitely was covering the pain with drinking.
Everything was going along fine. Cracks, however, were beginning to appear in their relationship. Robert is addicted to pornography now, and he's neglecting Sabrina, both emotionally and sexually. Sabrina feels neglected, Robert is addicted to porn, and into this mix comes Jonathan Hearn, a young firefighter. Sabrina and Jonathan meet and soon develop a romantic friendship or relationship, whichever one you.
At what point did it become a sexual relationship? A year later. So we talked for 2014. So this year? Before that. If you met him in 2014. Probably, let's say, talked for like, I am honestly super bad with time and dates. Okay. Let's just round about 8 months maybe. Or 6 months or something like that. Like it wasn't right away, anything like that, you know.
And this love triangle ultimately led to a tragic outcome. Robert and Sabrina were into a swinging lifestyle. So you got the keys, you've got the permission, you've got the papers. You can do what it is you please. So they're in this Tarzan lifestyle, swinging. Come on, get with the program, man. And the whole thing with swinging, apparently, so sex, you don't get emotionally involved. There's a community here in Silver Lakes. There's there's friends and there's a community of swingers. You have sex, you have a good time, but you don't get involved. Sabrina, however, finds herself emotionally involved with Dale, a close friend of Robert. And so Dale, who was a close friend of Robert, is now clearly a close friend of Sabrina. This emotional connection was causing a strain on both Sabrina's marriage with Robert and Dale's relationship with his wife, Nicole. Robert says, hey, look, listen, you need to cut this out. I'm not having it. Sex is fine. Emotions, how dare you?
During the time that you and Dale were involved in this relationship, was Rob aware that you were basically involved in this relationship with Dale?
Yes, he was.
At some point, did Rob have you cut off the relationship with Dale?
Yes, he did.
Why did that occur?
Because Robert didn't want anybody else to know that we opened up our marriage.
Into this mix apparently wanders young Jonathan. Jonathan is 11 years younger than Sabrina. Bear that in mind, because there's some other details, but he's a young guy. He's significantly younger than Sabrina. But Sabrina is attracted to this guy, and, well, she's a swinger, so come on. I mean, come on. You don't really expect him to have just stayed and cuddled him, kiss him. No. She's a swinger. Therefore, they begin to have sex. The problem here is that Sabrina is one of these people that develops feelings. She can't just do the swinging thing. But anyway, let's go back a little again, because I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let's find out where this affair actually begins. Because everybody's happy, there's a swinging lifestyle going on, you go from here to there. But Sabrina works in a Costco, and during the course of work, apparently, good old, what's his face? What's his name again? Jonathan. This all starts when Sabrina meets Jonathan Hearn, a young and religious firefighter, while working at the Costco. Struck up a conversation and discovered they had a mutual friend. Oh, I swing, you swing. I don't know. I'm just surmising. But they had a mutual friend, and I would assume, because I'm not sure on this one, I would assume that perhaps it was someone who was also involved in the whole swinging lifestyle. She likes Jonathan. Jonathan likes her. 1 + 1 always equals 2, you know. I'm just saying, you know, she's a swinger. I don't know whether he was, but he's a young man, 24. Here's a woman of 35 who's throwing herself at you, perhaps. What would you do if you was a young man? Oh, she's married. But she's a swinger. Bear that one in mind. Despite all of their attempts, bear this in mind once again, all of their attempts to remain friends, their relationship quickly turned romantic.
And then he's like, well, maybe I'll see you there. Like, what's your number? And I had never given out my number to like a stranger before. And I did. I instantly like felt just like, oh my gosh. And I had thought prior to that I had mentioned Robert, you know. And I always do. That's like my protection, especially with other, you know, men. You know, like I always brought up Robert right away. So I had never done that before. And I felt bad. And but then he called and messaged me, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like I got myself into, so I didn't answer it or respond. And he apologized. He was like, "Are you married? I'm so sorry." And then I put, "Yeah, I thought that you knew that. It's no problem. It's okay." And that's how that started.
Sabrina sees Jonathan as her first love, someone she envisioned a future with. The affair, because they are now having an affair, doesn't go unnoticed. Robert confronts Jonathan about his involvement with Sabrina, and although Jonathan denies a full-blown sexual affair, he does admit that things were flirtatious. Sabrina promises to end the affair, or the flirtatious, as Jonathan liked to call it, to maintain this image of a perfect... What image is this woman talking about? Seriously.
Was Robert, based on what you observed of Robert's demeanor, was he angry?
He wasn't happy.
Did he do anything with your phone after he finished talking to Jonathan?
Yeah, he broke my phone.
But anyway, time goes on. She says she's going to stop it. She does for a minute or two. But then she resumes contact with Jonathan, claiming that her husband was exploitative and controlling. And she paints a picture of a marriage lacking in love and with concern for their family.
Over time, did yours and Rob marriage change in some way? And how did your relationship with Rob change?
We opened our marriage bed, and it changed the dynamics of our sacred bond.
She's having an affair. Bear in mind, she could have just been having sex because she had the keys. She had the permission. She's a swinger. So she didn't need to go behind backs and do any of that. And Jonathan has high Christian morals, as does Sabrina, because they're Christians with values. I'm not even being funny or nothing. I'm trying to set the scene here. But she's painting out Robert as a bad guy, controlling, manipulative. I don't know. Say no more, that's what I say. Least said, soon is mended. But between the two of them, they decide, because Robert's such a controlling guy and Sabrina wants out. And as far as she's concerned, Robert would rather die. Robert would rather die than get a divorce. I don't think that's true, I think Robert would have taken the divorce rather than to die. So between the two of them, Sabrina and Jonathan, they plan to poison Robert using arsenic trioxide disguised in his favorite foods. The motive being that they wanted to be together. This trioxide poisoning, I don't know what really happened here. I've got to be honest, because Jonathan swears that they discussed this, him and Sabrina, and that apparently Robert had a rare medical condition which would make it difficult to detect the poisoning symptoms. She suggests particular foods such as a wrap from Costco, banana pudding, all potential vehicles for the poison. Put the poison in the food. These are his favorite things. Give it to him, eat whatever.
Did you have any other methods in mind?
Briefly considered some others, yes, but
And when you came up with these methods, was this by yourself or in conjunction with Miss Lamont?
in conjunction with Sabrina.
And Jonathan did duly purchase the arsenic trioxide online, had it delivered to his grandparents' art studio. So clever boy this. So as to avoid suspicion, he even conducts tests on a neighbor's dog to get the effective dosage just right. All this was apparently established by the police. All established. But for some reason, either they didn't go through with it or it didn't work. And that was supposed to be on Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, I tell you. Yes, they were going to kill this man on Valentine's Day. Shocking. That doesn't happen. Fast forward August 2014. Jonathan's morning is marked by a trip to Walmart for some ammo, has some adhesive flashing to transform his motorcycle's appearance, got a backpack, a mask resembling an old man, and a makeshift silencer assembled. Why he didn't buy a proper silencer, I don't know. But he made one out of a Maglite barrel. Gets himself some dark clothing. He wasn't mucking around here. August 17th, stalks his quarry. Robert's gone to work. Jonathan follows him, reaches the rail yard where Robert works. Now, across the street, Jonathan is observing Robert, his movements and the likes, and he sees that an opportunity to kill Robert, because he's got a gun, as we know. Opportunity comes. Steels himself for this. Right. I'm gonna do this. You know how it is when you're gonna kill someone. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. Funny thing is, for some unknown reason, I don't know how, but he happens to, I don't know whether it's bump into Robert or Robert sees him and they have a conversation. Well, during the course of the conversation, Jonathan pulls out a gun, shoots Robert once. Robert's done for. Jonathan has killed him, makes a quick call. He manipulates. Robert fires once. He fires twice. During the course of the conversation, Jonathan pulls out his gun, shoots Robert once, shoots him twice. Robert's done for. Jonathan calls Sabrina with confirmation. The deed is done. Robert is dead. A short time later, a co-worker stumbles upon Robert's dead body. So, the deed is done. It's now up to the police to find out what happens. And an investigation commences with the aim of finding the murderer, Robert Lyman. Now, spouses are always the first people who are suspected. Robert's been killed. And the police are looking for surveillance footage. You know, these days every business has got CCTV outside. So what they're trying to do is retrace his steps, see if they can find some indication of what happened, what occurred. Because it has to be said, Robert was a very popular guy, apparently. You know, everybody loved Robert. He was just a good guy. So the police on this case straight away. And footage from the rail yard where Robert was killed shows an unknown man limping around. Now, that raises suspicions about his possible involvement. You know, some unknown man just limping around. Come on. So it's crucial that the police identify this man and determine his connection to the case. And this is where the old Good Samaritan comes in. A nearby company comes forward with surveillance video that shows Robert Lyman on the road leading to his office, along with multiple other vehicles. All of these motorists, except for a man on a motorcycle, were identified. Now we're getting somewhere. This mysterious motorcyclist has become a person of interest, but his identity remains unknown. The search for surveillance footage played a crucial role in identifying potential suspects and unraveling the complex web of relationships involved in this tragic case. And it does highlight the importance, in this day and time, of technological resources in modern investigations and how they can provide key evidence that ultimately leads to justice. We have the discovery of this mysterious motorcyclist and his connection to the case. In the investigation into the death of Robert Lyman, a crucial breakthrough comes when this mysterious motorcyclist becomes a key focus of the investigation. But it's about 2 weeks after Robert's death, the police receive a tip from a friend of the Lymans. And it really was this tip that led investigators to identify Jonathan Hearn as the mysterious motorcyclist seen in the surveillance footage.
Now, when you first received the information, the description, John, and all that followed, what did you think?
I was caught.
So when you first heard the description of John, white male, leaving on a motorcycle, it was pretty obvious to you who they were talking about.
It was.
Then further investigation reveals that Hearn and Sabrina were in an affair, which started as we know when they met at a Costco's where Sabrina worked part-time. Now, Jonathan and Sabrina are the prime suspects. But believing that someone is guilty and proving that someone is guilty are two different things. So, to gather more evidence, detectives decided to wiretap Sabrina and Hearn's phones. And while some of the conversations were intriguing, there was nothing that directly implicated them in Robert's murder. But these were the only two people with any kind of motive. So to test Sabrina's reaction, investigators pulled a little bit of a fast one. What they did was they actually fed her some false information to see how she'd respond to that. She immediately called Jonathan Hearn, on a burner phone to alert him about the new details, which once again starts to substantiate and gives further it's adding weight to the suspicions. Now you're starting to think, now the biting makes sense. You know what I mean?
Beeping sounds on some of her calls, but that's the only thing we really discussed as far as that she had noticed.
That evening that the wiretap is from, November 11th, did you think you were going to be arrested that day?
I did.
That really did lead the police down a new path, ultimately, which led to them solving the case, kind of comes from Jonathan Hearn himself. Because for some unknown reason, he calls up a friend of the Lyman's, Jason Bernatine, and leaves a voicemail expressing remorse for Robert's death.
A lot of increasing weight of guilt and of just sort of conflict and inner turmoil on almost every level of my life. And so this being the November 13th, just days before I was arrested, these are literally the final stages of that inner conflict that I dealt with. I was very, very near to throwing in the towel, to surrendering and finally acknowledging the grievous nature of my sin. So it's kind of a strange mix of incomplete theology, I guess you could say. Here I'm talking about all the good things about God and this purpose that I think He has for life, and yet I was just on the other side of the tipping point of finally acknowledging sin, which I'm not trying to give anyone in this room a lesson in theology. I'm in no place to do that, but I think we could all agree that the most basic aspect of receiving forgiveness is to have acknowledged one's sin. And so I was literally days away from that, but these are the murmurings of someone who's coming very close to confessing or repenting or acknowledging, I guess you could say, their sin.
Seriously, why did he do that? The police were going nowhere fast in this one because there was no real evidence, I suppose. But I don't know whether he felt he needed salvation or something like that, but he might as well have given himself up, really and truly, because that piece of evidence, or not even, well, was it evidence, or that tip is what really had the police now on Jonathan Hearn's case. So they arrest him. They arrested both Sabrina and Hearn on suspicion of killing Robert. And at Jonathan Hearn's residence, police discovered items matching the description of the mystery man seen on the surveillance footage near the crime scene. And it's at this point that Hearn struck a plea deal that involved testifying against Sabrina in exchange for a reduced sentence. Hearn admits to killing Robert and alleges that Sabrina helped plan it. She rejected his suggestion of a divorce because remember when I said that she said that Robert would rather be dead than divorced? But in the trial, Jonathan turns on Sabrina. She was convicted 4 out of 6 charges and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Hearn, on the other hand, was convicted of manslaughter and received a sentence of 25 years and 4 months. Now, I've got to say something. Just a little tip for any potential murderers out there. No, I'm being serious. Look at it this way, yeah? I'm assuming you've never done this before, and you're hoping it's all gonna go to plan. Now, aside from the fact that you're hoping, and hope is for the underprivileged, you're a newbie. How many times have you planned something that you've never done before and it came out exactly as you planned? You ever bake a cake for the first time? That probably flopped as well. And the likelihood is that this will. So just don't do it. My advice to you, words of Joey Swole, mind your own business, do better. So, November the 18th, 2014, Sabrina and Hearn are arrested on suspicion of killing Robert. During the search of Hearn's home, investigators found a motorcycle, a helmet, a red bandana, and a backpack, all matching the description of a mystery man seen on surveillance footage near the crime scene. Additionally, they discovered a grocery bag that was filled with receipts. Remember when I told you about the whole business of trying to poison Robert? The man had all the receipts there. Strange. Despite the fact that Jonathan was arrested and Sabrina was released because there was insufficient evidence against her at the time. This went on for 3 years before they actually went to trial, so they didn't go to trial until 2017. And it was only late in the day that Jonathan decided, yeah, I'm going to turn rat on this woman. I don't really blame him. Why should he go to jail by himself? So yes, he admitted to killing Robert and alleged that Sabrina helped plan it after rejecting his suggestion of divorce. He also stated that Sabrina provided him with information about Robert's work schedule and the layout of the facility where he worked. Sabrina, however, maintained her innocence throughout the trial.
What's the purpose? There can only be one. Tell me another one. I'm waiting. Tell me why you would tell him exactly where Rob's at. You can't find that place by accident. We knew somebody told him. Okay? Now, I'll be honest with you. There's no reason to tell your boyfriend exactly where your husband is working. Absolutely none. Right down to the building. What's the purpose? There can only be one. Tell me another one. I'm waiting. Tell me why you would tell him exactly where Rob's at. You can't find that place by accident. We knew somebody told him.
Denying any involvement in planning her husband's murder or the alleged poisoning plot mentioned by Hearn, but she wasn't fooled. Well, like I said, in February of 2018, she was convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The case of Sabrina and Robert Lyman captivated the attention of many during the trial. The prosecution presented evidence that clearly pointed towards Sabrina and her lover Jonathan Hearn as the masterminds and perpetrators behind Robert's murder. And Jonathan testified against Sabrina, revealing details of their affair and their plan to poison Robert. He admitted to purchasing arsenic trioxide, a deadly poison, and conducting tests to determine the appropriate dosage. Jonathan's testimony basically painted a picture of a calculated and premeditated murder plot. The defense, however, argued that Jonathan was solely responsible for Robert's death and that Sabrina was coerced into going along with his plan. They claimed that Jonathan manipulated Sabrina and took advantage of her vulnerable state within her troubled marriage. But I ask you, once again, take a good look at this hard-faced woman and tell me if you think she could be manipulated, because I personally don't buy it at all. That woman manipulated? I ain't had it. Throughout the trial, both sides presented their arguments and called witnesses to support their claim. But as I say, Sabrina was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The jury believed that she played an active role in planning and executing the crime. Jonathan, on the other hand, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for a reduced sentence. Hence why he was sentenced to 25 years and 4 months. That's it. And remember, usually. Now, the defense had a few arguments. They even had claims of prosecutorial misconduct. They made several claims in an attempt to overturn the verdict. The alleged prosecutorial misconduct, insufficient evidence, and exposure to extensive media coverage, which they claimed biased the jury.
Marshall bringing up her motion after court was adjourned, once again saying that Lamone's former attorney Richard Terry was to blame.
This girl got railroaded. She was not properly defended at trial.
However, the 5th District Court of Appeal rejected these claims and upheld Lyman's conviction. The court stated that there was overwhelming evidence of Lyman's intent to solicit the murder of her husband Robert and her involvement in the conspiracy with her accomplice Jonathan Hearn. The defense argued that Hearn's testimony wasn't corroborated and that jurors were influenced by media coverage, but the court found that Hearn's statements were indeed supported by evidence, including Robert Lyman's murder. Furthermore, the court dismissed the defense's claims of prosecutorial misconduct, stating that they had no basis. The prosecution successfully established Lyman's motive for the murder and her financial gain, which we haven't mentioned up till now, from her husband's life insurance policy. Oh, there was a wealth of information and evidence to support the hypotheses or the theory that Sabrina Lyman was guilty. And despite their appeals, the appellate court confirmed Sabrina Lyman's conviction and life sentence. The defense's claims were thoroughly analyzed and found to be without merit. They were thrown out. There's been plenty of discussion about Hearn's plea deal and his testimony against Lyman in a recent court decision. That decision came in January of 2023. The life sentence of Sabrina Lyman was upheld, and Jonathan Hearn took a plea deal and testified against her during the trial. And it was his testimony which was crucial in establishing Lyman's guilt. He was the one who revealed that the two of them had conspired to kill Lyman's husband, Robert Lyman, with the intention of Hearn becoming the stepfather to Lyman's children. Remember, this case serves as a reminder of the importance of thorough investigations and strong evidence in criminal trials. The testimony of accomplices can also play a significant role in determining guilt or innocence. In other words, be careful of the people who you choose to have as friends. You know what I mean? An examination of the evidence that supported Hearn's statements, the prosecutor, Eric Smith, successfully established Lyman's motive, including financial gain. What a surprise. From her husband's life insurance policy. These were just some of the factors that contributed to her sentencing of 25 years to life. But the court also affirmed that there was overwhelming evidence to support Lyman's intent to solicit, kill, and conspire with Hearn to commit murder. And despite the appeal process, Sabrina Lyman remains convicted and will serve her life sentence for her role in this tragic crime. And with the appellate court's ruling upholding Lyman's conviction and sentence, it brings closure to this, quite frankly, sordid tale of love triangles, murder plots, and betrayal that gripped Kern County. Overall, in this instance, the appellate court's decision affirms the strength of the evidence against Sabrina Lyman and underscores the importance of justice in cases involving serious crimes like murder. Further discussions on the adequacy of the sentences and public opinion was, how should I say, it was divided. I would say it was divided. There was maybe a majority section of the public who saw the... So let's look at the sentencing of this case. Some argue that the sentences handed down to Sabrina and Jonathan Hearn were too lenient, considering the severity of their crime. Others say that justice was served as both individuals were found guilty and received prison terms. Public opinion played a significant role in this case. Many expressed outrage and disbelief at the actions of Sabrina and Jonathan. The betrayal of trust, the planning of a murder and motive behind it have shocked and disturbed the public. But as someone who's been looking into these things for quite some time, unfortunately it just doesn't disturb me and it doesn't shock people like this. But there is one aspect of this case that cannot and shouldn't be overlooked, and that's the impact on Sabrina's children. The consequences of their mother's actions are undoubtedly going to have a lasting effect on their lives. They're going to have to navigate through the aftermath of a tragedy like this and find ways to heal from such a traumatic experience. They lost their father because their mother planned his murder.
And it's the kids that suffer so bad.
I just hope one day we get to be a part of Robbie and Leanna's life. You know, they're the ones that are suffering in the long term.
This case has raised some important discussions about justice, morality, and the consequences of one's actions. Sabrina and Robert Lyman appear to have a perfect life on the surface, but behind closed doors, their marriage was far from traditional. They engaged in swinging mutually until Sabrina decided to have an affair, or two, maybe more. But it was the affair with Jonathan Hearn, a religious firefighter, that led to a love triangle which would ultimately turn deadly. That affair lasted for 2 years. It's a long time to have an affair and then think, okay, let's kill. I don't know. It just seems strange to me. the circumstances. Robert Sweet, apparently a nice guy, and lots of people liked him. And the fact Robert and Sabrina, that is, were in a swinging relationship just suggests to me there was no real need to kill him. But what do I know? This love triangle murder case is a tragic reminder of the importance of trust, communication, and honesty in relationships, and it also highlights the need for individuals to seek healthier solutions when faced with marital difficulties rather than resorting to violence. I mean, come on, killing the man? I don't know about that. The shocking and tragic murder of Brooke Preston sent shockwaves through her family and the community, leaving them desperate for answers. As we grapple with the heart-wrenching details of the case, we find ourselves entangled in a web of questions surrounding the events that culminated in this unfathomable crime. Join me as we embark on a journey into the depths of Brooke Preston's murder, meticulously dissecting the intricate narrative that shrouds this unsettling incident. A life extinguished too soon, a family left in mourning. The tale of Brooke Preston's murder grips us with its chilling intrigue, but as we'll soon find out, the path to understand this tragedy takes us through the twists of a story that defies easy explanation. On March the 25th of 2017, 21-year-old Brooke Preston was brutally stabbed to death by her roommate and childhood friend, Randy Herman Jr., in their West Palm Beach, Florida home. The facts surrounding the murder are clear, as Herman himself called 911 and confessed to the killing. Yet, amidst this apparent clarity lies a shadow of doubt cast by Herman's astonishing defense, an assertion that the fatal act was committed during the throes of a severe hangover. The true motives and the enigmatic circumstances of the crime continue to elude our grasp. To unravel the layers of complexity that led to this heart-wrenching tragedy, it's of vital importance that we plunge headfirst into the intricate fabric of the relationship shared by Randy Herman Jr. and Brooke Preston. Their friendship, which was a convoluted tapestry of emotions and connections, laid the foundations for the events that would eventually unfold. And as we delve into this narrative, we encounter a mosaic of emotions, motivations, and decisions that painted the backdrop of this grim tale. The setting of the story finds Brooke Preston on the brink of a new chapter in her life, one that was poised to unfold in the bustling streets of New York. New York, so good they named it twice. Well, you don't know that one? Check it out. Anyway, she was going to join her boyfriend in pursuit of new dreams, and yet beneath the surface of this impending journey, a tension was beginning to simmer between her and Randy Herman, her long-standing confidant and roommate.
We're trying to find out exactly what transpired. Like I said, your mom's going to have questions, and we know that. And listen, that's obvious. We know that you're sorry for it. We need to get in touch with Brooke's family. No. We need to let them know.
Their friendship, which was once characterized by shared laughter and mutual understanding, has started to fray the edges, revealing intricacies that would later prove pivotal.
What brought you to Florida? Okay. And you moved with Jordan and Brooke? Okay. So you all came down together at the same time, July last year? Or separate? You all come at different times? Okay. Were you guys all friends back in Pennsylvania? Okay. So you all knew each other, same area? Are you all roughly the same age? Okay.
Herman was known to wrestle with personal demons in the form of alcohol, and he grappled with his inner struggles as the day in question dawned. This day, which would etch itself into the annals of history, was marked by his immersion in an excessive quantity of beer. Yes, he decided to get extremely drunk, an attempt which perhaps was known to drown his woes or numb his inner turmoil. The choice he made, which was to surrender to the allure of alcohol, would cast a shadow over the path that lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an amber glow onto the shared abode that they had in West Palm Beach, the dynamic between Preston and Herman grew increasingly strained. And bear in mind they're just friends. No accounts of them being anything more. But it appears as if one of them had some unrequited feelings, we shall say. And the fragile nature of their friendship was highlighted by Herman's intoxicated state, which basically was straining Preston's patience to the limits. Who wants to be around someone who's just frankly pissed? This alcohol haze that had enveloped him had eroded the boundaries of reason. You're going to see this later on, so be mindful of this. And their interactions were tinged with the awkwardness that often accompanies drunk people. You know, the mind is not very straight when you're drunk, and Herman had reportedly, get this, consumed more than 30 beers. 30 beers. I'm surprised he could stand up. Faced with all this discomfort and the uncertainty, Brooke decided, let me leave him for a while. So she left, went and saw a mutual friend, and in making that choice, she unknowingly altered the course of events and set into motion a sequence of occurrences that would reverberate through time. The night unfolds. The foundation of their friendship has been rocked under the weight of his unresolved emotions, the alcohol-induced misunderstandings that he had, and the decision that she took which pushed them onto separate paths for the evening. Each step that was taken, each emotion that was suppressed, carved deeper grooves into the narrative, leading relentlessly towards the tragedy that would ensue in the hours to come. As the night surrendered to the tentative embrace of dawn, the weight of the events hung heavy in the air, a tangible reminder of the fractured dynamics between Randy Herman Jr. and Brooke Preston. And the dawn's light would reveal a scene that was drenched in melancholy, with the Florida sun casting its golden hues upon a home where a once thriving friendship now seemed to hang by the thinnest thread.
Do you know where she stayed last night? At a friend's house. Do you know what the friend's name is? What's the friend's name that she stayed with? Kyle. Where does Kyle live? Does he live around you? Around West Palm somewhere? Okay. What time did Brooke go to Kyle's house?
The new day unfolded with its own set of foreboding hopes as the aftermath of Herman's night of basically pissing it up began to manifest itself in the throes of a merciless hangover. We all know how it goes. Well, most of us do. Long night, plenty of drinking, even more, plenty of drinking. His head was pulsing with the relentless rhythm. Each beat a reminder of the choices he'd made and the consequences he was yet to fully comprehend. So, amidst this physical and emotional torment, a weary but remorseful Herman found himself amidst the remnants of the life he'd shared with Brooke Preston. The act of helping her pack her belongings felt like a solemn march towards a future that had been rewritten by the events of the preceding night. The shared memories, the laughter, and the secrets that once colored the walls of their abode seemed to echo distantly as they navigated the silence that enveloped them. And then came the moment of parting, a poignant, almost surreal exchange that would later be etched into Herman's memory as Brooke Preston embarked on the journey toward her new life. Herman stood as a sentinel at the doorway of his room, watching her recede into the corridors of their shared history. His testimony, a fragile lifeline woven from the threads of his fragmented recollections, claims that he witnessed her leave his room. Her presence evaporated into the day's embrace. That's what he claimed. But followed twist of fate that defied comprehension, a sequence of events that spiraled into a realm where reality and nightmare converged. The embrace of sleep claimed Herman once more, pulling him into its murky depths with a deceptive gentleness.
Did you actually go to bed last night? Okay. Did Brooke go to bed last night?
She stayed somewhere else.
She stayed somewhere else?
She came back this morning, she said goodbye, I gave her a t-shirt for her boyfriend.
Okay.
So I remember.
She came back. Do you know where she stayed last night? At a friend's house.
In that fleeting space between slumber and wakefulness, Herman's consciousness roused from its slumber. His eyes adjusted to the dim light that was filtering through the curtains, revealing a sight that would haunt him forever. Brooke Preston's lifeless form, bathed in cold light. Reality's dagger pierced his befuddled mind, and his gaze now locked onto the knife in his trembled in hand, his blade stained with damning evidence. Time stood still, innocence and guilt suspended, memory offered no solace, leaving him stranded in his self-created nightmare.
She came back.
Okay.
They gave her the shirt. What? Park.
The room whispered of unspoken horrors and echo of the unthinkable, and in the grip of this chilling realization, Herman's trembling fingers found his phone, his heart pounding in his chest as he dialed 911. Through a voice filled with dread, he confessed to a truth beyond horror.
And you called up 911, and you said that there was a murder. Okay. And then you said, I'm at the park. When they asked you what happened, you said, I'm the one that did it. I'm sorry. Right? Okay. Remember telling that to the 911 operator? Randy? Okay.
The truth that demanded Alex's retribution and the reckoning with his own unfathomable actions. On March the 25th of 2017, the narrative of tragedy unfolded. 21-year-old Brooke Preston, her life extinguished, her body cold, lay victim to a brutal act. A sense of unease settled over Haverhill Park, the stage where the grim epilogue of Brooke Preston's life would be unveiled. The once tranquil pavilion now bore silent witness to a scene of chilling disarray, a tableau painted in shades of dread. The police arrived, the sirens cutting through the stillness of the evening like an anguished cry. Flashing lights cast an eerie glow, casting distorting shadows that danced upon the pavilion surface. And amidst all this surreal backdrop stood Randy Herman Jr., his presence marked by the stark contrast of crimson stains against the backdrop of his disheveled attire. Blood, plenty of blood, both his own and another's, painted a grim narrative across the scene. His hand, which bore a crude tapestry of wounds, served as a painful testament to a violent struggle. A struggle that had unfolded with an intensity that left its mark upon his flesh and psyche alike. But the revelations were far from contained within the confines of the pavilion. The tendrils of the tragedy extended to their shared dwelling, a place that had once echoed with the warmth of companionship. Here, however, the scene was a canvas of horror, an unfiltered snapshot of an irreversible act that had shattered the bonds of friendship forever.
You need to let me know what started it. Something started it, Randy. You got given her a t-shirt, and the next thing you know, something happened, okay? What happened, Randy? Did you want her to leave? Randy, did you want her to leave? Did you want her to leave? It's a yes or no question. Did you want her to leave? You don't care. Okay? Did you guys argue? You don't think so. Then how did she get hurt?
Within those walls, the presence of a hunting style. I spoke of intent, a haunting reminder of a choice that defied reason. Its blade, the harbinger of Brooke's demise, gleamed ominously under the harsh scrutiny of forensic lights. The scene bore the imprints of a struggle, the room echoing with the unspoken cries of a violent confrontation. Now, amidst all of this stark violence, another detail emerged. Brooke Preston's hand marked by the traces of her own defensive resistance. The wounds etched upon her palm, a testimony to her struggle against the encroaching darkness. The wounds etched upon her palm spoke of a desperate bid for survival that had ultimately been in vain. As the investigators meticulously documented the grim scene, the weight of the tragedy loomed heavy. Now we come to the trial. You would not believe what the defense came up with, or maybe you would, because Randy Herman Jr.'s defense posed a quite startling assertion. Despite the fact that there was a hunting knife that had been purchased, the defense stated that he committed the murder while in a state of sleepwalking.
Randy, what's the backstory, Randy? There's something there. Randy, there's something there.
Well, you're going to have to do it. That's the problem. This doesn't go away. This isn't do-overs. You don't get to excuse yourself away from it. It is what it is. The evidence is going to speak for itself. We sleep at night knowing we gave you an opportunity. Randy, look at me. I'm treating you like a man. Look at me so I can talk to you. I'm trying to treat you like a man. You do know. And the evidence is going to tell us exactly what happened. And Jordan Preston, the sister's going to tell us about what was going on with you and Brooke.
I don't know. We didn't argue. Nothing happened. I don't know.
You just lost it and went after her.
I don't know.
Now, this was met with skepticism not only by the prosecution but also by the attentive members of the jury who bore witness to the unfolding courtroom drama. There was a clash of narratives inside the courtroom, each thread being meticulously woven by the opposing sides. Herman's defense mounted a case that was centered on a volatile combination of alcohol and apparent sleepwalking episodes from his past.
Did you tell them everything you needed to tell them?
Yes, yeah.
How do you feel about the fact that Brooke Preston died that morning?
Terrible. I don't know how to describe it.
That's all the questions I have.
They constructed a portrait of Herman as a man adrift in the haze of his subconscious, guided by impulses he could not consciously control, leading him to commit the harrowing and gruesome act. Yet the prosecution had an alternative perspective. They wove together a story that pointed towards a motive which was far more human in nature.
You came to South Florida from the state of Pennsylvania because your life was spiraling out of control. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
When you came to West Palm Beach from late 2016 through March of 2017, the time of the murder, you were still struggling with addiction, correct?
That's correct.
Your life was still spiraling out of control?
It was.
Unrequited feelings that Herman harbored for Preston. This was augmented by a deeply unsettling incident, Herman's naked intrusion into Preston's closet. And this action, according to the prosecution, signaled Herman's unresolved emotions that finally culminated in the ultimate act of violence. So amidst this legal tug of war, the jury found themselves tasked with the untangling of a web of competing narratives. The defense's sleepwalking theory, while compelling, seemed to falter in the face of the calculated brutality of the crime.
And with regard to the defendant's limited window of time, could that have happened scientifically speaking?
He's wide awake minutes before the crime. And you can't go from wide awake to sleepwalking in a matter of minutes.
We know that Randy admitted being awake.
The wounds that were inflicted upon Preston, the room was drenched in blood, and the apparent methodical nature of the act all cast a shadow of doubt upon actuality of an act conducted while unconscious. You need to really stop for a moment.
Please tell me.
Things were going downhill.
Because, don't get it wrong, there have been cases where people have been found to have been sleepwalking and killed someone. So there is no legal precedent. Sleepwalking. So the trial progresses. The tension in the courtroom is palpable. Spectators, legal teams, jury members, all grappling with the weight of evidence that's been presented. Each new detail woven into the fabric of the case adds another layer of complexity to an already convoluted story, leaving everyone present to question the boundaries of human understanding and the depths to which our emotions can drive us. The defense had a compelling story, but the 12-person jury just wasn't moved by it. Sleepwalking is an intriguing theory, don't get me wrong, it was interesting, but they weren't swayed. The prosecution clearly demonstrated that Herbert's actions didn't stem from him being unconscious or drunk, but there was a deeper motive. Basically, he wanted Preston, and he couldn't have her. He got drunk, and in his drunken state, the anger that he felt came to the fore and killed her. And the assistant state attorney, Reed Scott, dealt the final blow to the sleepwalking defense when he said, "This is skin, this is bone, and this is muscle. You're not going to sleepwalk through that." Kind of the nail in the coffin. And the jury's collective nod affirmed the prosecution's argument. And as the trial concluded, Randy Herman Jr. was found.
In just a few moments, you'll be taken to the jury room by the courtroom deputy for your deliberations. even if you do not like the laws that must be applied, you must use them. And on behalf of both the state of Florida and on behalf of Mr. Herman, I want to thank you for those efforts.
By the time that the trial ended, we got back into the deliberation room. We sat down. It was almost just not a sigh of relief, but a sigh of, wow, let's get this information out and start talking about this right now.
Guilty. There really wasn't much else that the jury could have done in this situation. It was a unanimous decision. Now, in a heart-wrenching testament to the tragedy's enduring impact, Brooke's sister, Jordan Preston, stated that her murder wasn't the result of mental instability. Her murder was premeditated and 100% the result of a decision that Randy Herman made on March the 25th of 2017. The case should have ended there. Herman's conviction to life without parole was the final, or so the Preston family thought. In 2020, there was a controversial Hulu documentary called Dead Asleep, which delved into the intricacies of the case. It dissects the nuances of the relationship between Herman and Preston, the potential hidden motives and the complexities that evade a simple explanation. Now, it must be noted that Jordan Preston has repeatedly asked for this documentary to be taken down, and it's my understanding that at this present time, it's still being shown. The haunting tale of Brooke Preston's tragic murder lingers on, an unsettling enigma that continues to stir debates and compel us to confront uncomfortable truths. In the wake of her demise, her roommate and childhood friend, Randy Herman Jr., was thrust.
Guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
Ultimately convicted for her murder, his audacious defense, which centered around the claim of committing the act while sleepwalking, introduced an unexpected layer of complexity to the trial. However, the jury's final verdict shattered the narrative, condemning Herman to a life sentence behind prison walls.
Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, signed jury foreperson.
That timeline that we drew up, and we drew it. We had all the text messages. We had time when she pulled in, when he pulled out, and after that timeline, everyone was on the same page.
The defense's gamble on sleepwalking was born from Herman's mother's testimony, which invoked a history of somnambulism, sleepwalking. But the prosecution, in their stance, posed a counter-narrative. They painted a portrait of Herman's feelings for Preston, an unrequited affection teetering on the edge of obsession. Previous unsettling acts served as brushstrokes on the disturbing canvas, suggesting that the crime might not have been an act of unconscious sleep, but rather one of agony and consciousness. And in the aftermath of the trial, we have a myriad of questions. The intricate dance between human behavior and the influence of alcohol takes center stage here, again, unfortunately.
All right. Randy Allen Herman Jr., a jury of your peers having found you guilty of first-degree murder, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
Magnify the consequences of unchecked intoxication, the frail boundary between sanity and the unfathomable depths of the human mind when marred by obsession and emotion is laid bare before all of us. Sleepwalking as a defense? I'm not sure. The case does serve as a stark reminder of the dire consequences, though, of alcohol, which is allowed to go unchecked and clouds your judgments and drives individuals down paths of inexplicable violence. It's a tragedy that didn't have to happen. And it's a chilling reminder of life's fragility and the profound consequences of our actions. And as discussions continue, her story remains as an indelible testament to the complexity of the human experience and the unfathomable depths to which emotions can propel us. So as we reflect on this tragic event, our thoughts remain with Brooke Preston and her loved ones. It's important to honor her memory by working towards a society that promotes understanding, empathy, and the prevention of violence. The murder of Ryan Poston is a tragic case that captivated nation's attention. It's a story of love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences that followed. On October the 12th, 2012, Ryan Poston, a successful attorney in Cincinnati, Ohio, was shot and killed in his own home. The perpetrator was Shayna Hubers, his former girlfriend.
Campbell County 911. Ma'am, I killed my boyfriend in self-defense. What did you kill him with? A gun, a loaded gun in the house.
According to reports, Hubers claimed it was an act of self-defense after an argument escalated. However, the evidence presented during the trial suggested a different story. Witnesses would reveal that Poston had ended their relationship just days before his death and had planned to move on with his life. During the investigation, it was discovered that Hubers fired 6 shots at close range, leaving Poston with no chance of survival. The brutality of the crime shocked the community and led to a highly publicized trial. The murder of Ryan Poston had a significant impact on both the legal system and public perception. It highlighted issues surrounding domestic violence, and it raised questions about self-defense claims. The trial shed light on the dynamics of abusive relationships and the dangers they present, sparked conversations about the warning signs of domestic violence and the importance of supporting victims before tragedies occur.
He said, "You're just a hillbilly from Kentucky." And I am. I guess the hillbilly came out of me. I took that.
An all too familiar theme. It raised concerns about how easily firearms can end up in the wrong hands and be used as tools of violence.
I recall Ryan standing over me and grabbing the gun that was sitting on the table and pointing it at me and saying, "I could just kill you right now and get away with it. Nobody would even know."
It should be noted that of the 195 countries in the world at this precise moment in time, over 175 have the right to bear arms, but only 3, America, Mexico, and Guatemala, actually have it enshrined in the Constitution. And perhaps if you look at the level of violence with guns, I should say, there could be a correlation. But let's move on. Additionally, the case also brought attention to the issue of, gun control. It raised concerns about how easily firearms can end up in the wrong hands and be used as tools of violence. Furthermore, this case served as a reminder that anyone can be a victim of violence regardless of their background or social status. It brought communities together in grief, and it served as a call for increased awareness and action against domestic violence. In conclusion, the murder of Ryan Poston was a shocking and tragic event that left a lasting impact on society. Ryan Poston's murder shocked the community and made national headlines. Poston was a successful attorney in Highland Heights, Kentucky, and was just 29 years old when he was fatally shot in his own home on October the 12th of 2012. And the person responsible for his death was his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Shayna Hubers. Shayna Hubers and Ryan Poston had a tumultuous relationship that lasted for around 1 year. They met on an online dating website and quickly became involved. However, friends and family noticed early on that their relationship was unhealthy and characterized by jealousy and possessiveness, which is never a good sign. Let's look at the events that led up to the murder that began on the night of October the 11th, 2012. Ryan and Shayna had spent the day together at a shooting range where they practiced with firearms. I really have got to pause for a minute here. I know there's things that you can share, honestly I do, but I just find it strange that you would go to a shooting range. These kind of things to me seem a little ominous at the very least. Let's keep this moving up. Later that evening, they returned to Ryan's condominium to continue their evening together. And at some point during the night, an altercation broke out between the couple. Now, according to Hubers, Poston was physically aggressive towards her, threatened her with a gun. And in response to this, remember this is her defense, in response to Poston being physically aggressive towards her and threatening her, she claimed she acted in self-defense and shot him multiple times.
The stuff he was saying to me was so abusive while he was throwing me around the room. I think in the midst of that, my love turned to hate. I remember screaming, reaching up to grab the shirt. You, how dare you mock my family? How dare you talk about you speak poorly of my mother and my family? I'm not your typical murderer,
So the motives and the tensions involved in this frankly tragic case have been the subject of much speculation and debate. Some sources suggest that Shayna Hubers was frankly deeply infatuated with Poston and that she became increasingly possessive and controlling as their relationship progressed. Others speculate that Hubers had a history of mental health issues that may have contributed to her actions. And during the trial, which subsequently followed, it was revealed that Shayna Hubers had made several disturbing statements about killing Ryan before the murder took place. And additionally, there was evidence presented that showed that Hubers had sent numerous text messages to friends claiming that she planned to kill Poston or harm herself if he tried to break up with her.
I was like begging him to stay in the relationship and be with me. But you get to a point where you've had enough.
Ultimately, Shayna Hubers would be found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. But what this case really does serve as a tragic reminder of is the potential consequences of unhealthy relationships. And really, from where I'm standing, it's more about prevention is better than cure. You need to be able to recognize the signs. Apparently, family and friends all saw warning signs, red flags. And it seems as if Ryan himself was quite concerned about Shayna, but unfortunately, things happen. So we get to the murder trial. I don't think there was never any doubt as to who killed Ryan Poston. Shayna Hubers herself called 911, so even though the prosecution still had to prove that she committed the crime, there was never any real doubt as to who committed the crime because she herself said that she killed him. What's in question is whether it was self-defense or murder. The prosecution argued that it was stone cold murder and that Shayna Hubers intentionally shot and killed him during a heated argument. The defense claimed that Hubers acted in self-defense as she feared for her own life.
When I arrived at the condominium, Ryan was standing at the foot of the dining room table. His eyes were completely black.
A common defense, but I think as time will go on and reveal it really wasn't the case in this situation. Now, throughout the trial, the prosecution continued to present compelling evidence to support their case that this wasn't self-defense, and so they introduced forensic evidence, including ballistics and DNA analysis, which linked Hubers to the murder weapon and the crime scene. The prosecution also presented testimonies from friends and acquaintances who spoke about the troubled relationship between Hubers and Poston.
You're going to come to see that she is jealous and she is calculated, and most of all, ladies and gentlemen, she is manipulative. Someone who would go to the ends of the earth to get her way, because in her world, what Shayna wants, Shayna gets, and what she wanted more than anything in 2012 was Ryan Poston.
And I think they were only together for a year, which isn't that long, but there's clear testimony from outsiders, when I say outsiders, people not in the relationship, friends and family, that indicate and point towards there being a very tumultuous relationship that some might call it toxic. But there was clear evidence from testimonies that their relationship was based on jealousy, possessiveness, and manipulation. Perhaps from both sides. I don't think that this is a clear-cut case of, oh, it was just Hubers who had difficulties. There's got to be some elements here where Poston didn't help, but that doesn't condone or doesn't justify her actions. But I do think it's relevant that we state that both sides said this.
He was alive when she shot him here, 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 and here. And he was alone, except for the woman standing over him, gun in hand. His murder. Her.
One key witness in the trial was Dr. William Smock, a forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy on Poston's body. Now, Dr. Smock, funny name, get it out your system. Come on, get it out your system. Dr. Smock, he testified that Poston had been shot 6 times at close range, indicating a more deliberate and intentional act This is another one of the testimonies that added weight to the prosecution's argument that Hubers planned and executed the murder. She just needed a reason. And to further support their case, the prosecution delved into Hubers' state of mind leading up to the murder and presented evidence to show that Hubers had a history of mental health issues and that she'd made disturbing comments about harming herself or others. And all this was prior to the incident. Psychiatrists and psychologists also testified about her psychological state and provided insights into her actions.
She was very distraught. She was depressed. She would vacillate between being very emotional and tearful, and then she would become very subdued and almost flat.
So let's look at the defense. What did the defense have to say about all of this? Well, the defense countered by presenting their own psychological experts who argued, rightly or wrongly, that Hubers had experienced moments of extreme emotional distress leading to a temporary loss of control. The psychiatrists, psychologists, lawyers, they're an interesting lot, no doubt. For me, I'm listening to all this and I'm thinking, okay, fair enough. How does a temporary loss of control lead to you being able to pick up a gun, point it at someone, and shoot 6 times, and then go on and call that? Where's the loss of control to me? Clearly the jury wasn't buying this one either, but do you get what I mean? How do you lose control to the point where you pick up a gun and shoot someone 6 times? What and where was the loss of control? I'm a bit baffled by that one myself. I don't see how that logically works out. But anyway, after weeks of testimony and evidence, both the prosecution and the defense delivered their closing arguments. The prosecution focused primarily on painting a very clear picture of Hubers' premeditation and her motive for the murder, whilst the defense emphasized the concept of self-defense, highlighting the alleged abuse and fear. Yes, the fear that Hubers felt.
He was screaming and he had his hand on the table. And he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. He was sitting, he was enough that when I shot him, he went like this. Literally. That's when I knew he was dead. Or close to it, and twitching. And I let him, I still, even though it hurt, enough of me loved him that I couldn't stand to watch him twitch. I knew he was going to die or have a completely deformed face. He's very vain. One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants my best friend who's a dentist to do his veneers and wants to get a nose job. Just that kind of person. And I shot him right here. I gave him his nose job he wanted.
Ultimately, it was going to be up to the jury to determine Hubers' fate. But after deliberation, they found Shayna Hubers guilty of murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 20 years.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Shayna Hubers, guilty of murder under instruction number 5.
The trial of Ryan Poston's murder showcased the complexity of human relationships and the importance of thoroughly examining evidence and testimonies in criminal cases. Ryan Poston was a young attorney from Kentucky, successful. He looked to have everything. Young, good-looking young chap, 20, not even 30, had a career, looked like a successful career, which was going to lead on to more success. He had everything for it. And I think that is just part of what really caught the public's attention, because it didn't look like the usual case in terms of the players, so keep that in mind. But the prosecution, as I said, time for summing up, they indicated that Shayna Hubers, like I said, shot Ryan Poston multiple times and that it was premeditation. I mean, how do you shoot someone multiple times and you claim it was not just self-defense, but that also you just lost control? There's a lot of control in picking up a gun and aiming it correctly, accurately, 6 times.
He was throwing me around the room, picking me up and had my face and stuff.
That's not the same as what you testified to here about being bent over a stool and feeling because of the weight of him, your neck was gonna break. That's 2 totally different scenarios, right?
I was describing the same scenario using different words, and I didn't have the accurate words at the time to describe it. I was in a state of shock.
And the forensic evidence did show that Poston was killed by 6 shots to the head and torso. And the location of some of the wounds as well is what actually challenged Huber's claim of self-defense. And that's what led to some skepticism among experts and jurors. But like I say, the case captured public attention due to its shocking nature involving a young couple from an affluent background, and the media lapped it up. It was reported quite extensively, and public reactions, I must say, were varied, some expressing sympathy for Poston's family and others siding with Huber's. But there was, it has to be said, a lot of questioning about the validity of her claims of self-defense. I would say that from the beginning, the whole self-defense thing wasn't quite cutting it, let's say. But Shayna Huber's supporters, they argued that she was defending herself against an abusive partner. The motive also was something that remained a topic of debate during the trial.
I remember trying to stand up where I was sitting on the floor, and Ryan pushed me back down by my chest. He put his hand on my chest and pushed me back down onto the floor. And I was crying, and I was hysterically crying, and I recall Ryan standing over me and grabbing the gun that was sitting on the table and pointing it at me and saying, I could just kill you right now and get away with it. Nobody would even know.
How did you react to that?
I was shocked. I was afraid. I didn't understand what I had done to deserve any of this.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what happened.
He set the gun back down on the table, and he walked around the table, and he was still talking, and he was still saying hurtful things. I don't remember exactly what. And he was standing up from the chair, and he was reaching across the table, and I don't know if he was reaching for the gun or reaching for me, but I was still sitting on the floor at this point in time, and I got up off the floor, and I grabbed the gun, and I shot him.
Some speculated that it was primarily about jealousy, possessiveness, while others maintained that it was a clear-cut case of self-defense. But she didn't present as having any defensive wounds, so I don't know. We would like to remind our viewers, though, that this covers a broad aspect of the case, and if you really want to get the full details, you should conduct some further research for a comprehensive understanding of things. Ryan Poston's murder left a lasting impact on his family and loved ones. Ryan was a vibrant, a promising young man. His tragic death shook his close-knit circle to its core. His parents, Jay and Lisa Carter, have been devastated by the loss of their son, and they've also become vocal advocates for justice and gun control, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. And Ryan's sister, Katie, has also been deeply affected by the loss of her brother. It's often that, we look at the main protagonist, but it's not just the main protagonist, it's the loss. And that's something that all these cases can never truly emphasize. It's the loss to the people who are still living.
I will forever miss the possibilities. We will never know the incredible possibilities that Ryan Poston would have given to this earth. He was a tremendously gifted young man. The sky was the limit. A United States senator, a congressman, anything was within his grasp. He was a tremendously gifted young man.
Knowing that person that you love, you're never going to see them again. You're never going to speak to them again, talk to them again, laugh with them, cry with them. It's loss. That's the common thing. But there's more to this case. Yes, Shayna Huber's was convicted of murder in 2015. However, her conviction was overturned due to juror misconduct in 2016, and this resulted in a retrial, which ultimately ended in 2018, and Shayna Huber was again found guilty of murder. But let's look at the circumstances which led to the retrial. Now, the controversial reason for the retrial was the revelation afterwards that one of the jurors had had a previous felony conviction, and this discovery raised concerns about the fairness and impartiality of the trial, as it's generally believed, rightly or wrongly, that individuals with felony convictions shouldn't serve on juries. The defense argued that the inclusion of the juror with a felony conviction tainted the entire trial and the verdict should be overturned. The prosecution maintained that the juror's past had no bearing on his ability to serve as an impartial juror in this case. Ultimately, the impact of the juror's past felony conviction on the trial remains a subject of debate and speculation. There are some who argue that it could have influenced the verdict, while others contend that the mistrial was due to other factors unrelated to the juror's background. Now, regardless of the controversies, it was declared a mistrial and was scheduled to take place originally in 2017, but it didn't actually happen until 2018. So what do you think regarding the mistrial and the fact that a juror was was a convicted felon? Should that have any bearing? I would have thought personally myself that perhaps you, as someone who's been convicted, might feel more sympathy for someone. I don't know that it would convince me that that would make you... I don't see that the bias would be for you to definitely want to convict somebody. I don't know. What do you think about that one? Anyway, either way, second trial was scheduled. What can you do? So the second trial began in August of 2018, lasted approximately 2 weeks. Once again, both sides presented their evidence. This time, the defense focused a bit more on portraying Hubers as the victim of domestic violence. They certainly played that side of things up. They really did. Still didn't make that much of a difference because after 2 weeks, took the jury less than 5 hours. Less than 5 hours, and still they found Hubers guilty again. So after 2 trials, she was still found guilty unanimously. So there you go. Judge now has the job of deciding how long she's going to receive. He gave her life. So what are the reasons for a life conviction? Well, throughout the trial, Shayna Hubers lacked remorse for her actions. Witnesses also testified to her callous behavior and indifference towards the life she'd taken. Her former cellmate, Holly Nivens, revealed that Hubers had expressed excitement at being a celebrity, had even commented on her appearance in court. And Nivens also described how Hubers showed no remorse or guilt for killing Ryan Boston, which indicated a disturbing lack of empathy. And furthermore, her actions, Hubers' interactions with law enforcement officers and jail personnel were marked by a lack of remorse and a quite disturbingly casual attitude towards the crime that she committed. These behaviors only reinforced the perception that Hubers failed to grasp the gravity of her actions. So I would say that the absence of remorse shown by Hubers added in the criminal justice system, the sentencing hearing is a crucial phase, very crucial obviously, where the judge determines the appropriate punishment for a convicted individual. And it's during the hearing both the prosecution and the defense present their arguments, and the judge will thoroughly review the evidence and consider various factors before making a decision. Now, some of these factors include the severity of the crime, the defendant's criminal history, and any other aggravating or mitigating circumstances. Witnesses, such as the victim themselves if they're around, or their family members may also be allowed to provide impact statements, which help the judge understand the consequences of the offense. Moreover, the judge may consider the sentencing guidelines established by the jurisdiction, which provide a range of punishment options based on the nature of the crime and the defendant's criminal record. When imposing a life sentence, the judge typically considers, as I said, the seriousness of the offense, but also the potential risks the convicted individual may pose to society. Some of the common reasons behind a judge's decision to impose a life sentence tend to be aggravating factors. So, for example, if the crime involved violence, premeditation, or the use of weapons, the judge may determine that life sentence is necessary to protect the public and discourage similar behavior. Prior convictions. If the defendant has a history of repeat offenses or a pattern of violent behavior, judge may view a life sentence as the only way to prevent future harm. There's also things such as victim impact. The judge may consider the impact of the crime on the victim and their family, especially in cases that involve murder or severe physical harm. So a life sentence may be seen as an appropriate measure of justice. And then there's public safety. The life sentence may be imposed to ensure that dangerous individuals stay off the streets and do not pose a threat to society. And it's important to note that sentencing decisions vary depending on the jurisdiction and the specific circumstances of each case. And judges have discretion when determining sentences guided by legal principles, sentencing guidelines, and their assessment of the individual defendant and the crime committed. So as the case of Shayna Hubers has concluded, some are left wondering about her future and the possibility of parole. Currently, Hubers is serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years, which means that she'll be eligible to apply for parole in 2032, and she's incarcerated at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley. However, eligibility does not guarantee release. When considering parole, several factors will be taken into account or are taken into account. Several factors are taken into account, including the nature of the crime, the defendant's behavior in prison, and the level of remorse demonstrated, which in Hubers' case was very little. And the fact that she was convicted of murder will likely weigh heavily on the parole board's decision, whatever that may be. Additionally, her conduct while incarcerated, participation in rehabilitation programs, and her efforts to better herself may influence the board's decision. The family of Ryan Poston has expressed their opposition to the possibility of Hubers being granted parole. They believe that she should serve her full sentence without the chance of early release. Their grief over the loss of their loved one and the impact it has had on their lives makes it difficult for them to fathom Hubers being given a second chance, which is understandable. We can all understand that. Prosecution have also been vocal about their belief that Hubers should remain incarcerated for the rest of her life. They argue that the premeditated nature of the crime and the lack of remorse demonstrated Hubers during the trial should be taken into consideration when determining her parole eligibility. Although obviously the final decision on parole will rest with the parole board, the opinions of the victim's family and the prosecution may carry significant weight, but it obviously remains uncertain how these sentiments will ultimately influence the parole board's decision, but that's a matter for the future. In conclusion, Shayna Hubers' future and the possibility of parole raise many questions and emotions. The eligibility for parole after 17 years and the potential release considerations will be closely evaluated, taking into account the nature of the crime, Hubers' behavior in prison, and the level of remorse shown. Meanwhile, the strong opposition from Ryan Poston's family and the prosecution adds an additional layer of complexity to this already controversial case. 19-year-old Morgan Bauer vanished just weeks after moving from Aberdeen, South Dakota, to Atlanta, Georgia, with just $20 to her name in February 2016. She'd found housing through Craigslist, where she met a man who agreed to let her live with him in exchange for help with chores until she could afford to start paying rent. But the living arrangement fell through less than a day after Morgan arrived, leaving her in urgent need of both money and a place to stay. Text messages would later reveal that Morgan and her roommate had a falling out, but the nature of the disagreement is unclear. The teen's mother, Sherry Sickmeller, now Keenan, told local station WSB-TV that Morgan had left her clothes at the apartment because she didn't know what else to do. A situation became even more desperate when a tax refund she was expecting never came through. Morgan knew that her parents' door was always open and that her family would welcome her back to South Dakota with open arms. But she was determined to make it in Atlanta. So she checked into a motel and began dancing at strip clubs for cash. According to court documents, Morgan was seen at a club in Gainesville on February the 25th, 2016. She left with a group of people who dropped her off at a gas station in nearby Covington and was last seen getting into a green Mitsubishi Eclipse. Her final Instagram video, which was posted the following day, appeared to show the young woman walking in a park with an unidentified man trailing behind her. Now, Morgan had very little money to her name at the time, which indicates that she lacked the resources to purposely disappear and also suggests that she may have been vulnerable due to her financial desperation. During the initial stages of Morgan's missing persons investigation, officials said that they didn't suspect foul play. Morgan's phone last pinged in Porterdale, which is roughly 35 miles off, just over 56 kilometers outside of Atlanta. In one of her last social media posts, she mentioned having landed a job at a strip club, although several club owners reportedly told investigators that Morgan had applied for a job but didn't have the proper paperwork to get hired. During a 2017 interview with WSB-TV, an employee who worked at a Waffle House near the club where Morgan was last seen mentioned seeing her on a few occasions when she came in after her shift. But she didn't seem to have much information to offer beyond that, including any details about the night that Morgan was last seen alive. All along, information about Morgan's last movements and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance has been scarce. And due to the sensitive and ongoing nature of the investigation, even Morgan's family wasn't privy to all of the details of her case. Until 2022, investigators believed Morgan's last social media post was made on February 25th. A friend of the woman discovered that the post was actually made on the 26th, causing authorities to rethink their entire timeline and the possibilities surrounding Morgan's fate. Now, Morgan's mother, Sherry Sickmeller, now Keenan, didn't want the young woman to move to Georgia, but Morgan wanted to live in the big city and be on her own, and her family wasn't going to stand in her way. Sherry was already worried to begin with, but the situation became even more concerning when Morgan just stopped communicating with her loved ones. She later told Dateline that it was unlike her daughter to go radio silent. Even if Morgan was angry at her mother or didn't want to talk to her for some reason, she would have likely contacted her grandmother. And what scared Sherry the most was knowing that Morgan was in survival mode as she struggled to gain her footing in her new city. From the moment Morgan vanished, her mother pleaded with the public for help finding her. She also urged her daughter to get in touch somehow and reassured Morgan that she wasn't in trouble. In the weeks following the teen's disappearance, Sherry told Dateline that she feared Morgan might be unable to get in touch because of whatever had happened to her. Sherry and her husband traveled to Atlanta to search for their daughter and raise awareness about her case. They passed out flyers and took to social media to spread the word to as many people as possible. But as the years dragged on with no solid answers, Morgan's loved ones became increasingly desperate to find out what had happened to her. During an interview with news station WXIA in early 2023, Sherry said she forgave whoever was responsible for Morgan's disappearance, but to please just bring her back. At the time, the devastated mother feared that Morgan might have been trafficked. It was in late July of 2023 that the FBI and multiple other law enforcement agencies were seen searching a residence in Porterdale, less than a mile or just under 2 kilometers from the park where Morgan filmed her last Instagram video. According to news sources, the home is a historic mansion, locally known as the Porter House. A police spokesperson revealed that a search warrant was being executed in light of new details pertaining to the case, but declined to explain why officers from the Peoria, Illinois Police Department were spotted at the scene. Local station Channel 2 Action News flew over the site with a helicopter and captured footage of law enforcement tents set up next to a large house in a wooded area. Other video provided by the police showed federal agents painstakingly combing through the property. Just days later, authorities announced the arrests of 2 suspects in connection with Morgan's disappearance. According to an indictment, Jonathan Alexander Warren and Caitlin Goebel both put their hands around Morgan's neck. Her cause of death is listed as strangulation. The document further alleges that Warren and Goebel dismembered and burned Morgan's body and destroyed other physical evidence. Law enforcement hasn't specified whether any human remains were found, only revealing that items of evidentiary value had been recovered from the scene. 27-year-old Jonathan Warren was arrested in Los Angeles on suspicion of multiple felonies, including murder, malice murder, aggravated assault, concealing a death, and necrophilia, as well as a misdemeanor charge for tampering with evidence. During the search in Porterdale, shortly before the arrests, police confirmed that the property belonged to Dr. Robert and Judith Warren, suggesting a possible relation to the suspect. The property owners were reportedly cooperating with the investigation. The second suspect, 27-year-old Caitlin Goebel, was arrested in Peoria, Illinois, which could help to explain the presence of Peoria police officers at the scene of the search that preceded the arrests. She also faces several felony counts including murder, malice murder, concealing a death, aggravated assault, and tampering with evidence. The suspect's connection to Morgan is unclear, and authorities are remaining tight-lipped about most other information surrounding the case. For now, the most anyone can do is wait patiently for the details to unfold in court. For over 3 decades, the brutal murder of Kathy Esposito, a college student, cast a long shadow over Prescott, Arizona. The heinous crime remained unsolved, haunting the community until now. Yavapai County Sheriff's Office deputies have finally cracked the case, bringing closure and justice to Esposito's family. And this article will delve into the harrowing story of Kathy Esposito's murder, the long quest for her killer, and the recent breakthrough that has brought a measure of solace to those who loved her. June the 13th, 1987 marked a fateful day in the history of Prescott, a day that would forever change the town and its residents. On that seemingly ordinary morning, Kathy Esposito, a 23-year-old college student, embarked on what should have been a peaceful hike along the picturesque Thumb Butte Trail. Now, the trail is known for its breathtaking vistas and serene beauty, and it was a popular destination for outdoor enthusiasts, attracting hikers, nature lovers, and students alike. Kathy used to seek solace in nature, attracting hikers, nature lovers, and students like Kathy seeking solace in nature. Kathy's day began much like any other. The sun was just beginning to cast its warm glow over the rugged landscape as she made her way to the trailhead, riding her bicycle. With her backpack slung over her shoulders, she set out on her solitary journey. The air was crisp, and the promise of a beautiful day hung in the atmosphere. As she ventured deeper into the heart of Thumb Butte Trail, surrounded by the soothing sounds of nature, something sinister lurked in the shadows. The tranquility of the trail was about to be shattered by a horrifying sequence of events that would leave an indelible mark on the town and its people. Hikers in the vicinity, out to enjoy the same natural beauty that had drawn Kathy to the trail that morning, suddenly found themselves startled by desperate cries for help echoing through the trees. Panic and confusion gripped them as they rushed toward the source of the cries. The scene that unfolded before them was nothing short of a nightmare. Kathy lay on the trail, lifeless, surrounded by the breathtaking yet haunted landscape of Thumb Butte. Her young life had been brutally cut short in a manner that defied comprehension. She had been subjected to a level of violence that was difficult to fathom. A single gunshot wound to the eye had marked the beginning of her ordeal, followed by a savage stabbing, and finally, a gruesome attack with a rock and ratchet. The trail that had been her sanctuary had become the setting for a horrifying and senseless crime. However, when Esposito died, DNA analysis wasn't being used, so the murderer was never identified. The murder of Kathy Esposito was unsolved, but it remained open and active for 36 years. Now recently, Sheriff David Rhodes named Brian Scott Bennett as her killer. Multiple pieces of evidence have been crucial in identifying Bennett as the perpetrator. Forensic analysis has uncovered DNA evidence at the crime scene that directly links him to the murder of Kathy Esposito. In addition, his fingerprints were found on various items at the scene, solidifying the case against him. Now, after thorough analysis, forensic experts were able to confirm a match between the DNA found on the wrench and the DNA extracted from Bennett's remains. This revelation significantly strengthened the case against Bennett as the prime suspect in Kathy Esposito's murder. Additional evidence and the testimony of witnesses further supported the conclusion that Bennett was indeed responsible for the crime. He'd been seen in the vicinity of the hiking trail on the day of the murder, as several witnesses reported his suspicious behavior. Authorities also discovered Bennett's fingerprints on a water bottle found near the crime scene. Furthermore, investigators have connected Bennett to a series of other attacks in the area. Witnesses have come forward providing crucial information that places him at the scene of these crimes. Kathy Esposito was Bennett's first victim, but not his last. Sheriff David Rhodes, in his announcement, disclosed the shocking details of Bennett's reign of terror. In April 1990, he attacked and sexually assaulted a second victim on the same trail and at the same time of day as Esposito's murder. The victim was camping with her boyfriend and ventured out for a hike on Thumb Butte Trail. Bennett ambushed her, held a rock to her head, and subjected her to a horrifying ordeal before fleeing into the woods. The horror didn't end there. In July 1990, Bennett was accused of an attempted assault at a house party in Chino Valley, Arizona. A young woman who'd been drinking sought respite in a bedroom, but Bennett followed her, attempting to sexually assault her. Witnesses managed to break down the door and Bennett fled. He was arrested by the Chino Valley Police Department, but later acquitted due to conflicting eyewitness testimonies. On June 2nd, 1993, Bennett struck again, this time at the Prescott post office. He approached a fourth victim, holding her at knife point, and subjected her to multiple sexual assaults. Despite his arrest, a lack of evidence once again led to no consequences for his actions. On January 27th, 1994, Bennett returned to his home state of Kentucky and died by suicide. In 2020, detectives had a break in the case when investigating Bennett's second victim. Familial genealogy identified two brothers who could have been the suspect, and one of the matches came back as Bennett. 2 years later, Yavapai County gathered enough evidence to obtain a warrant to exhume his body from a cemetery in Kentucky. Then in March 2023, DNA linked Bennett to the 1990 case on Thumb Butte Trail. Through the work of dedicated volunteers, numerous detectives, and the many partners who give their time and their hearts to solving these cold cases, 4 women were given either closure, peace, or validation today, said Sheriff Rhodes. The resolution of this decades-old case has had a profound impact on the Prescott community. For years, the unsolved murder of Kathy Esposito was a dark cloud hanging over the town. Now, with Bennett's identity confirmed and justice served, the residents can begin to heal. It's a testament to the tenacity of law enforcement, the power of forensic science, and the enduring spirit of a community that never gave up on finding the truth. The years of uncertainty and fear have left an indelible mark on the people of Prescott. There was a collective sense of vulnerability, knowing that the killer had never actually been brought to justice. Families were wary, especially of allowing their loved ones to venture out into the picturesque yet perilous trails that surround the town. A cloud of suspicion hung over the town's youth during Bennett's reign of terror, and the fear of the unknown weighed heavily on everyone's minds. In the aftermath of the breakthrough, there's been a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The residents of Prescott have found a renewed sense of security. There's a collective sigh of relief, as Bennett's identity and fate have been sealed forever. Parents no longer need to caution their children with warnings about the unsolved murder. The specter that haunted Prescott has been vanquished. This case has also showcased the resilience of law enforcement and the dedication of those who never gave up hope. Detectives, investigators, and volunteers dedicated countless hours to pursuing justice, combing through old evidence and never abandoning their quest. They exemplify the unwavering spirit of those who are committed to bringing closure and justice to the victims and their families. The story of Kathy Esposito's murder is a poignant reminder of the resilience of law enforcement, the advances in forensic technology, and the unwavering determination of a community to seek justice after 36 years of darkness. The case has finally seen the light of truth. The victims have been given closure, peace, and validation, thanks to the relentless efforts of dedicated investigators, volunteers, and the power of science. While the scars may never fully heal, Prescott can now move forward with the knowledge that justice has been served for Kathy Esposito and all those affected by Brian Scott Bennett's reign of terror. The resolution of this case also serves as a beacon of hope for other communities dealing with unsolved crimes. It demonstrates that justice, even after decades, is possible with advancements in forensic science and the unwavering dedication of those who refuse to give up the fight for the truth. The memory of Kathy Esposito will endure as a symbol of resilience and perseverance in the face of darkness, proving that even the coldest of cases can one day find resolution. For many, small-town America is synonymous with close-knit communities and wholesome family values, but dark secrets often lurk beneath the surface and wear away at the squeaky clean veneer that is shown to outsiders. And sometimes these inconvenient truths become impossible to conceal, yet remain shrouded in guilt, paving a long and painstaking path to justice. That's the case when it comes to the disappearance of Crystal Rogers, a mother of 5 who hasn't been seen or heard from in over 8 years. 35-year-old Crystal Rogers went radio silent just before the 4th of July holiday in 2015. After failing to reach her for 2 days, her mother, Sherry Ballard, reported her missing. At the time of her disappearance, Crystal was living in Bardstown, Kentucky, with Brooks Hook, her boyfriend and the father of her youngest child. Hook claimed that he last saw Crystal on the night of July the 3rd. He said she was sitting in their living room playing on her cell phone when he went to bed, and that she wasn't home when he awoke the next morning. This wasn't unusual, according to Hook, who told investigators that it was customary for Crystal to leave when she needed space. In fact, he admitted that their relationship was rocky and claimed that Crystal often slept at a relative's house after they argued. On the same day Crystal was reported missing, her Chevy Impala was found abandoned on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway, not far from her home. The vehicle was unlocked and had a flat tire, and Crystal's keys, phone, and purse were inside the car. Crystal, nowhere to be found. Even more curiously, the driver's seat was pushed way too far back for someone as short as Crystal to reach the gas pedal, indicating that a much taller person had parked the deserted sedan. One thing was for certain: Crystal would have never willingly abandoned her children. Moreover, those who knew her said it would be highly out of character for her to leave her house in the middle of the night because she supposedly needed space. For these reasons alone, Crystal's family and friends knew something was terribly wrong and that she was in serious danger if she was still alive. Unfortunately, all efforts to find the missing woman failed to turn up any clue to her whereabouts. Brooks Hook was a person of interest in Crystal's disappearance from the very start of the case. By the time law enforcement officially named him as a suspect 3 months later,
the FBI wrapped up
after we didn't find her.
Crystal Rogers disappeared.
Remember Crystal Rogers
of Bardstown near the intersection.
Parents Tommy and Sherry
help
Ballard
to bring Crystal home.
investigators were pretty sure that Crystal was dead, but her body remained missing, and evidence tying Hook to the crime remained skits at best. Hook denied any wrongdoing, and authorities had no choice but to cut him loose while they continued working the case. At the time, Brooks's brother, Nick Hook, was a Bardstown police officer. He was questioned about the case and was fired from his job for allegedly refusing to cooperate with the investigation. Nick allegedly failed a polygraph test. More specifically, he was accused of lying when he said he didn't know where Crystal was. Despite these suspicious findings, Nick continued to deny any involvement in Crystal's disappearance or even knowledge of her whereabouts. He insisted he was being 100% honest with the interrogator and became increasingly defensive throughout the interview. Nick eventually lost his temper, calling the detective a bucket liar.
It's not just me. I showed you. Dude, I don't give a damn what your computer said.
During an earlier conversation with law enforcement, Nick had claimed that he rarely spoke with Brooks and that he was unaware that Crystal had gone missing. The interviewer expressed doubt that something so serious could happen involving a close family member, and nobody would have told him, but he stuck stubbornly to his story. A later review of the interrogation footage showed that Nick took a phone call from Brooks during his very first interview with law enforcement. According to police, he claimed that Brooks had encouraged him to cooperate but protect himself. Surveillance footage captured just hours after the interview showed Nick and Brooks pulling into the driveway at their family's farm at the same time, further disproving Nick's initial claim that he and Brooks seldom interacted. Nick Hook's name would come up repeatedly in connection with events surrounding Crystal's disappearance, but much like his brother, he continued to walk free due to a lack of evidence to justify an arrest. Sherry and Tommy Ballard never gave up the search for their daughter, even after the official investigation stalled. They left no stone unturned and kept extremely detailed records of their findings, including the tiniest tidbits of information and the most seemingly insignificant observations. The Ballards also extended the search to social media by creating a Facebook page dedicated to finding Crystal. These efforts felt necessary since, from the family's perspective, law enforcement didn't seem particularly invested in solving the case. In November 2016, roughly 16 months after Crystal went missing, Tommy Ballard was shot square in the chest on a family-owned property during a hunting trip with his grandson. He died instantly, and his murder remains unsolved to this day. Sherry Ballard believes Tommy was targeted because of his relentless quest to find Crystal. Both she and Tommy had previously stated during interviews that they believed Brooks Hook was involved in their daughter's disappearance, and Sherry continues to suspect that Brooks either killed Crystal or had someone else do it. She also believes he played a role in Tommy's murder. Tommy Ballard's father, Till Ballard, has also stated that he believes Crystal and her father's deaths are directly connected somehow. Speaking to the Lexington Herald Leader in 2023, he said that Tommy wasn't going to stop searching until he found answers, and that someone had to stop him. Both Crystal and her father's deaths are currently being investigated by the FBI, which took over the case in 2020. The quest for answers finally started to gain momentum after the agency stepped in and began searching properties connected to Hook, including his family's 245-acre farm. In July of 2023, a spokesperson announced that the FBI had made significant progress in bringing the case to its rightful conclusion, but they declined to go into detail about these alleged developments. The first arrest in connection with Crystal's disappearance finally came in September 2023, when 32-year-old Joseph Lawson was charged with criminal conspiracy to commit murder and complicity in tampering with physical evidence. Crystal's name was redacted from court documents listing the charges, but Lawson's attorney confirmed that the allegations against his client are related to the case. Lawson was never publicly named as a person of interest in Crystal's disappearance or death prior to his arrest, leaving civilians stunned by the news. According to Lawson's indictment, prosecutors believe he destroyed, mutilated, concealed, removed, or altered physical evidence relating to the case. He pleaded not guilty and is being held on bonds totaling $550,000. In October of 2023, nearly a month after Joseph Lawson's arrest, prosecutors charged Brooks Hook with Crystal's murder. The nature of the suspected connection between Lawson and Hook is unclear. It's extremely rare for authorities to pursue a murder charge with no body, but it's not unheard of, and the authorities in this case finally believe they have enough evidence to secure a conviction in Crystal's case. Hook pleaded not guilty and is being held at a maximum security facility on a $10 million bail as he awaits his next court date. The judge denied his request for lower bail, citing the gravity of the murder charge and his access to money. As of mid-November 2023, Hook's attorney has filed a motion requesting the dismissal of the judge currently overseeing the case due to potential bias stemming from an unrelated matter. According to family court records from 2017, the judge presided over a child custody battle between the woman Hooks dated after Crystal Rogers went missing, who was also named Crystal, and who Brooks is the father of her child. In his ruling, the judge clarified that his conclusions on the custody case had less to do with any suspicions against Hook than with his girlfriend's questionable parenting decisions. In a 9-page ruling, he wrote, "The court is simply astonished that Crystal would want a relationship with this man, Brooks Hook, who is the prime suspect in the disappearance and presumed death of his previous girlfriend." Now, the court has not yet determined whether the judge will be replaced, but the prosecutors argued against the motion, and the judge has denied harboring any bias toward Brooks Hook. In the meantime, it appears as though plans for another arrest may be in the works. According to court documents, authorities have the gun that they believe was used to kill Tommy Ballard. Brooks's brother, Nick Hook, allegedly sold the gun to a member of law enforcement using a fictitious name, leading many to believe that he could be the next suspect to face charges in the disturbing saga of death that has rocked Bardstown to its core. The gun's currently undergoing testing to confirm whether it was the murder weapon, and the results will most likely determine whether prosecutors will move forward with charges against Nick Hook. Now, whether or not justice will come full circle for Crystal Rogers, Tommy Ballard, and their surviving family members remains to be seen. For now, the victims' loved ones are satisfied to see Brooks Hook finally being held accountable for his alleged crimes and They're hoping that Nick Hook's arrest will come next. Closure seems like a distant dream for the loved ones of Sarah Yarborough, a young Washington woman whose murder went unsolved for decades after she was killed near her high school in 1991. Long-awaited justice finally came more than 30 years later, in 2023, when an unlikely suspect faced accountability for his actions in a court of law. On the morning of Saturday, December the 14th, 1991, Sarah Yarborough awoke in a panic, thinking she was running late for drill practice. She threw on her uniform and rushed to her high school in Federal Way, Washington, only to realize she'd actually arrived early. With nothing else to do, she probably sat in her car and waited for her teammates to show up. When Sarah's teammates began to arrive for practice, they noticed her car in the parking lot, but Sarah herself was nowhere to be found. They began searching for her, only to turn up empty-handed. Less than an hour later, a pair of teen boys crossed paths with a suspicious-looking man while taking a shortcut through some bushes near the school. The suspect exited the bushes ahead of the boys, who noticed that he was acting strange but paid little attention to him otherwise. Moments later, the teens discovered Sarah's body right where the man had been lurking, and just 300 feet, 100 meters from where her car was parked. Sarah was partially clothed, with her jacket and several other clothing items laying in a pile nearby. She had been strangled to death with her nylon stockings, which were left tied around her neck. Drew Miller, one of the boys who discovered the murder scene, later told 48 Hours that it was clear, based on the appearance of Sarah's body, that she'd fought for her life during her final moments. He remembered seeing the mysterious suspect staring straight back at him after he and his friend discovered the body, and fearing for his own life. The boys ran back to Drew's house and dialed 911. Responding King County detectives noticed that there were no apparent signs of a struggle inside Sarah's car. Her purse, duffel bag, and orange juice were neatly placed in the front seat, leading investigators to speculate that she was lured to her death by a predator, pretending to be a civilian in need of help, or that perhaps the killer had told her he lost his dog or his car keys. It would have been in Sarah's nature to help, according to her family and friends, who described her as a feisty but selfless and kind person. It was also possible that she'd been threatened with a weapon and complied with the killer's orders to walk off into the bushes. Meanwhile, the witnesses who found Sarah's body worked with police to create a composite sketch of the suspect, which was distributed in large numbers throughout the area. Now, at the time, DNA technology was brand new, but investigators were able to glean a full profile from evidence at the crime scene. These initial findings, coupled with the witness accounts, made them fairly confident that they would soon solve the case. Unfortunately, the exact opposite happened. Authorities poured all their available resources into investigating the case, but leads dried up. The DNA profile remained unidentified, and the case went cold. Speaking with 48 Hours in 2023, Drew Miller described how the police repeatedly came back to him and his friends in hopes of gleaning useful details about what they saw. He felt like he was under unimaginable pressure to come up with information that he simply didn't have. As the wait for answers dragged on, community members built a memorial bench in Sarah's honor outside her high school. In the absence of a suspect being identified and brought to justice, it was one of the few things they could do to help process their grief. The memorial was unveiled in 1993, roughly a year and a half after Sarah's murder. At a time when hope was lacking, yet many people probably still believed the case would be solved sooner rather than later. By the early 2000s, investigators had followed up on over 3,000 leads, yet Sarah's killer remained elusive. Even the DNA profile found at the crime scene failed to turn up any matches in the newly established national database of samples belonging to convicted offenders, famously known today as CODIS. But DNA technology was advancing rapidly, and law enforcement continued to believe that the profile would eventually proved to be their smoking gun. In 2011, 20 years after Sarah's murder, detectives contacted Colleen Fitzpatrick, who helped pioneer a groundbreaking new investigative method that they hoped would help solve the case. Known as forensic genetic genealogy, the method involves identifying suspects through the DNA profiles of relatives who had shared their genetic information on public platforms like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. At a time when many police agencies were skeptical of genetic genealogy, the investigators trying to solve Sarah's murder were eager to give it a try. Shortly after joining the investigation, Fitzpatrick traced the suspect's family tree back to a man named Robert Fuller, who had come to America aboard the Mayflower during the 17th century. The Yarborough family had a close friend named Bill Fuller, who suddenly became an unlikely person of interest in the case. He looked nothing like the composite sketch of the suspect, was decades older than the man witnesses had seen near Sarah's body, and the Yarboroughs simply didn't believe he was capable of killing their daughter. But law enforcement was determined to leave no stone unturned, and with no other directions to go in, they pursued the lead. Fuller voluntarily provided his DNA to police and was soon ruled out as a suspect, which meant that he was likely a distant relative of the killer. Despite the setback, Fitzpatrick remained confident that she was on the right track, and the search continued. Fitzpatrick's team spent 8 years scouring the Fuller family tree for a viable suspect, and a breakthrough finally came in 2019, when they landed on a pair of brothers named Edward and Patrick Nicholas as possible candidates for a DNA match. The men were distant cousins of Bill Fuller. Edward's DNA was not a match, so investigators narrowed their focus on Patrick, who had not been mentioned even once in the thousands of tips they'd received. Patrick was divorced, lived alone, and didn't have any friends to speak of. He kept mostly to himself and, even more interestingly, didn't drive. Patrick relied solely on public transportation to get around, and the bus route he regularly took at the time of Sarah's murder drove right past her high school. Now, detectives began getting really excited about the possibility that they'd identified the killer. They were even more stunned when they looked at a younger photo of Patrick, who was 27 years old at the time of the murder, because it bore a strong resemblance to the composite drawing of the suspect, leading law enforcement to believe they were closing in on solving this case. Though all they needed was a DNA sample from Patrick to compare to the evidence left behind at the crime scene. Undercover investigators began following Patrick around in hopes of surreptitiously obtaining a DNA sample. They eventually struck gold when they saw him discard 2 cigarette butts and a napkin outside a laundromat. Just days later, law enforcement received a phone call confirming that the results were a match to Sarah's killer. Patrick Nicholas was arrested, but it would ultimately be up to a jury to decide if the authorities had caught the correct suspect. Drew Miller, one of the teenage boys who caught a glimpse of the suspect before discovering Sarah's body, told 48 Hours that when he saw Patrick Nicholas's mugshot, he knew without a doubt that law enforcement had finally captured the killer, who he described as the same guy, just older, and with the same evil eyes. When investigators told Nicholas they were investigating a young girl's murder, he didn't automatically deny any involvement in the case. Instead, he asked what year interested.
What we're investigating is the death of a young girl. Her name's Sarah Yarborough.
He eventually stopped talking and asked for a lawyer. A review of Nicholas's criminal record spoke volumes about his propensity for violence against women. After the case finally went to trial in 2023, a survivor named Anne Croney spoke to 48 Hours about her terrifying encounter with the suspect in 1983, 8 years before Sarah's death. She said Nicholas approached her near her car and struck up a conversation, and that he introduced himself by name and said he was new in town. He seemed normal at first, but he soon began to act strange and Crony started to feel uncomfortable. When she tried getting in her car to leave, Nicholas held a knife to her throat and tried to assault her. Remembering that he had mentioned he couldn't swim, Crony drove into a nearby river and swam away as fast as she could. By then, Nicholas already had a lengthy record, which included 2 convictions for previous attacks on women and a 3rd conviction for an attempted assault. He pleaded guilty to another attempted assault charge for attacking Crony and received the maximum 10-year prison sentence, but he served just 3.5 years before he was released back into society to continue his relentless campaign of terror against innocent women. If he'd served his full sentence, he would have been in prison and unable to murder Sarah Yarborough in 1991. After killing Sarah, Nicholas went on to assault at least one more woman. He committed all of his known crimes before it was mandatory for law enforcement to collect suspects' DNA for entry into CODIS, enabling him to fly under the radar for decades to come. The judge banned the prosecution from mentioning Nicholas's criminal history at trial, leaving them to hope that they had a strong enough case to convict him without it. Thankfully, the jury found the 59-year-old guilty, and he was sentenced to nearly 46 years in prison. This time, he's unlikely to be released, which means that he'll probably never be able to hurt anyone again. When decades passed with no arrests in the murder of a middle-class working mum from Virginia named Robin Lawrence, her loved ones began to wonder if her killer would ever be caught. Nearly 30 years later, justice may finally come full circle, thanks to breakthroughs in DNA technology and a dedicated team of investigators who made it their mission to solve the case. Ollie Lawrence Jr. was out of town on a business trip in November 1994 when his wife, Robin War Lawrence, stopped answering his calls. Concerned for the safety of Robin and the couple's young daughter, Ollie asked a family friend, Laurie Lindbergh, to check on them. Lindbergh and another friend drove to the Lawrence's home in Springfield, Virginia, and banged on the door. When nobody answered, the women circled around the house and found an open window. As the friends called out for Robin, her daughter Nicole wandered into view. She was dehydrated and dirty, and it was clear that she had been alone for a few days, but she was otherwise unharmed. The women climbed inside through the open window to retrieve the little girl and began searching for Robin. They soon discovered that the hallway leading to the master bedroom was completely covered in blood. Terrified by what they saw, they fled the home without looking any further and dialed 911 from a neighbor's house. Officers arrived at the scene to find Robin dead from multiple stab wounds. At the time of her murder, just 5 days shy of her 37th birthday, Robin was the director of the promotions department for an auto and tire company. She grew up in Syracuse, New York, where her father served as the city's first black council member and had met and married Ollie in the late 80s after divorcing from her first husband and moving to Washington, D.C. for a fresh start. Robin was a respected community member who got along with pretty much everyone in her life, and her marriage seemed to be going well, leaving her loved ones baffled as they tried to figure out who might want her dead. Ollie was also at a loss to explain why someone would target his wife with such a horrific act of violence. Unable to cope with the heartbreak of what had happened, he didn't return to he and Robin's home until nearly a month after the murder. When he did finally go there, he only stayed for a few minutes. He put the house on the market and moved to nearby Alexandria, where he began the painstaking process of trying to heal and carry on with his life. In addition to having to emotionally process the loss of his wife, Ollie dealt with the added strain of also being considered a suspect in the crime, even though he was in the Bahamas at the time of her death. The vast majority of murder victims are killed by someone they know and had a close relationship with at some point. So it's normal for a victim's spouse to be the first suspect in these types of cases. investigators found no evidence of forced entry at the scene, leading them to believe that Robin may have been familiar enough with her attacker to actually let them in, or that the person may even have had a key to the home. The severity of Robin's injuries made them believe that she was murdered in a crime of passion, which only furthered their suspicions against her husband. There were no outward signs of a burglary or other material motive for the crime. So at the time, it made sense to think that Robin was killed in a fit of rage. For a long time, the police believed that Robin's murderer targeted her specifically and went to her home with one specific goal in mind: to leave knowing she was dead. Ollie, meanwhile, adamantly maintained his innocence in a 1995 interview with the Washington Post, saying that it blew his mind that the police thought he might be responsible for Robin's murder. He said he'd not been able to properly grieve his wife's death due to the scrutiny he was under, and he felt that law enforcement was spending too much of its time focusing on him. A police spokesperson disagreed, claiming that detectives hadn't narrowed their sights on a specific suspect, and without enough evidence to point the finger directly at Ollie, they had no choice but to let him remain free. DNA samples which were collected from evidence at the crime scene didn't match the profiles of anyone in law enforcement's offender database, but DNA technology was still in its infancy at the time, and the police held on to the evidence for possible retesting in the future. In the meantime, detectives continued to work the case, hoping a breakthrough would come sooner rather than later. But as the months turned into years, it became clear that they would have to work extremely hard to chase down their smoking gun. Robin's family also poured immense effort into their quest to bring her killer to justice. In the months immediately following Robin's murder, they held rallies, distributed flyers, and did everything in their power to raise awareness, in the hopes that someone with information about the case would come forward. In 2019, police resubmitted the suspect's DNA sample for testing. A company that specializes in genetic genealogy, a relatively new process of finding people through their relatives' DNA, produced a profile and began searching genealogy databases where civilians had uploaded their genetic information. Experts spent 3 years piecing together a family tree before identifying a 51-year-old man from Niskayuna, New York, named Stephen Smirk as Robin's suspected killer. After narrowing their focus on Smirk, law enforcement utilized another type of genetic profiling known as phenotyping to determine what the suspect might have looked like at the time of Robin's murder based on the DNA collected from the crime scene. They compared the image to old yearbook and driver's license photos of Smirk and immediately noticed a close resemblance, furthering their suspicion that Smirk was indeed the killer. But without a DNA sample from the suspect and a positive match or a confession, they couldn't move forward with an arrest. In 2023, 2 detectives traveled to Smirk's home in Schenectady County, New York, to question him about the case and hopefully obtain a DNA sample. They arrived right as he was taking out his trash. Smirk voluntarily provided his DNA, and the investigators were excited because they believed they were extremely close to finally identifying Robin's killer. But they didn't even have to wait for the DNA results to come in before making an arrest. Shortly after arriving back at their hotel, they actually received a call from Smirk, saying he was ready to talk about his involvement in Robin's murder. He must have known he was about to be caught. Smirk turned himself into a local police station and spoke voluntarily with the detectives. He admitted to robbing and killing Robin and gave a detailed confession of the crime. Eli Corey, who led the investigation, would later reveal in a news conference that Smirk chose Robin at random, marking a surprising departure from the previously held belief that she was specifically targeted by her killer. There was no prior connection between the killer and the victim. and Smirk had a completely clean criminal record when he finally came forward, which explains how he managed to fly under the radar for nearly 3 decades. At the time of the murder, he was in the army and was stationed at nearby Fort Myer. Afterwards, he went on to marry, raise children, and lived a completely normal lifestyle. Smirk was extradited to Fairfax County, Virginia, where he's being held on a second-degree murder charge. Speaking with the Washington Post shortly after Smirk's arrest, Ollie Lawrence said he was completely shocked to learn that his wife's alleged killer had finally been caught. In his own words, he said, "You could have probably knocked me over with a feather." After waiting 29 years with no answers, Ollie had become doubtful that the case would ever be solved. He now lives in France and learned about the arrest after receiving an email instructing him to call a detective. Ollie told the Post that he understood and respected law enforcement's need to rule him out as a suspect, but he still feels that the police focused too heavily on him, especially after he proved he was out of the country at the time of the murder, and the investigators failed to turn up any compelling evidence that he might have played a role in Robin's death. And while he's happy that someone is finally being held accountable for the horrific crime, he said that the news of the arrest came with mixed emotions because it resurrected the loss and grief. And as the case works its way through the court system, more details about exactly what happened on the night of Robin's murder are likely to come to light. But at this moment, there's been no updates since Smirk's arrest, and it's unclear whether he's entered a plea or when his next hearing is scheduled. On the morning of February the 3rd, 1996, an observant passerby noticed that the lights were out and the doors were locked at the Lil Champ Mini Mart in Orlando, Florida. Now, this was unusual because the store was usually open at that time, prompting a concerned civilian to call the police. Responding Orange County deputies arrived to find 2 employees of a cash transporting company waiting outside in an armored truck for a routine cash deposit. The deputies also noticed that the employee on duty's car was in the parking lot and that there was blood on the store's exterior lock. Now, after unsuccessfully trying to call the clerk, 31-year-old Terry Paquette, they contacted another store employee to bring a key and let them inside. The deputies encountered a horror scene when they entered the store and found Terry dead on the bathroom floor. Someone had stabbed him repeatedly and slashed his throat while he was opening up the store. The killer proceeded to steal $1,000 out of the safe and fled the scene, leaving the floors and walls covered in blood. An autopsy revealed that Terry had been stabbed 73 times in the head, heart, lungs, chest, and abdomen.
Yeah, he was stabbed 73 times, more to the torso, and his throat was actually slit.
His store key was missing from the scene and has never been found. According to the Orlando Sentinel, Terry had moved to Florida from New Hampshire a handful of years before the murder. He lived alone and had no hobbies and no obvious passions, and mostly kept to himself. Terry worked at the Mini Mart up to 60 hours per week and did not drink alcohol. In other words, he was the epitome of the average Joe, and there were no outward indicators that his lifestyle would make him the likely target of a brutal murder. Now, while the nature of Terry's relationship with his family is unclear, his body wasn't returned to New Hampshire for burial. He was laid to rest in a simple grave in Seminole County, which now appears to be all but forgotten. Based on information from a family history website, Terry may have a living sister, but his surviving family seems to begin and end there. Law enforcement spent 2 weeks processing the murder scene for clues. A large amount of the blood found inside the store belonged to the killer, who'd apparently injured themselves during the murder. And based on the pattern of the blood, investigators believed the suspects had walked around the store after being wounded. The killer's blood was found on the store's lottery machine, freezer door handle, front entrance, and elsewhere within the store. Terry had deactivated the store's alarm at 5:39 a.m. and was dead by 7 o'clock in the morning. During that time period, a person had entered the store and called out for Terry, but the person left when he didn't respond. According to the police, the killer was in the store at the time, making the customer incredibly lucky that they decided to leave when they did. A search of Terry's vehicle and apartment turned up no useful evidence. So without any witnesses to the actual murder and little evidence to go on, it wasn't long before the case began to stall. Within 6 weeks of Terry's death, investigators' phones had stopped ringing completely. The investigation was officially closed in 1997, with the potential of being reopened upon the discovery of new leads. In 2003, detectives took another look at the case. They ran the killer's DNA through the National Offender Database, also known as CODIS, but failed to turn up a match. Investigators also re-interviewed witnesses and were able to eliminate some persons of interest based on a reanalysis of crime scene evidence, but they failed to glean any new information and were left with 0 suspects when the case once again stalled. The case was revisited yet again in 2019, following the formation of a cold case unit in Orange County. 2 years later, in 2021, detectives turned to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
And so just with the advancements in DNA and where we are in 2019 at the time when I opened the case, I figured there's got to be something we can do
for help solving the case through genetic genealogy. The relatively new science involves tracing suspects through their relatives' DNA via public platforms like FamilyTree and GEDmatch.com.
And once we were able to identify potential persons of interest, we then looked into their life and seen where they were in '96.
The findings pointed toward a close relative of Carol Ann Crawford and Kenneth Stoff Sr. One of the couple's 3 sons, Kenneth Stoff Jr., had previously worked at the convenience store where Terrence was killed, and he lived right down the street at the time of the murder. In the hopes of surreptitiously obtaining a DNA sample, basically being fortunate enough to get a sample, the investigators obtained a warrant to put a tracking device on Stoff's car. They followed him around while waiting for him to discard a piece of garbage in public, and they eventually got their chance when he threw a bag full of empty beer cans into a dumpster near his home in Eustis. The bag contained 7 16-ounce cans of Budweiser, which was more than enough to obtain a DNA sample. Stoff's proved to be a match to the killer's blood, and in November 2021, Stoff was charged with first-degree murder and robbery with a deadly weapon. It was Orange County's first ever cold case to be solved through genetic genealogy. During a press conference announcing Stoff's arrest, Detective Brian Savelli revealed that the suspect had a history of minor arrests.
Tuesday, with the assistance of our good friends at the Lake County Sheriff's Office, our detectives were able to arrest Kenneth Robert Stow Jr. For first-degree murder with a weapon.
And that he admitted to being a former employee of the convenience store. Stoff also allegedly denied killing Terry, but struggled to come up with an explanation for the physical evidence. By then, all of Terrence's known family members had passed away, leaving behind only some friends to notify of the new developments in the case. And while the case appeared to be solved, it would ultimately be up to a jury to decide whether law enforcement had indeed arrested the right suspect, a long-awaited conclusion. While awaiting trial in 2022, Stoff wrote a letter to the judge overseeing his case, requesting to be released from jail so he could help his fiancée with bills and expenses. Prosecutors and the local sheriff's office vocally opposed the request, citing the gruesome nature of the crime and arguing that Stoff was a flight risk. Stoff had some supporters, including neighbors who told local station WFTV-9 that the accused killer deserved to be released because he was innocent of the crime. The defendant's attorneys, on the other hand, argued that they needed Stoff's help with the case and that he could better assist in his defense if he were released on an ankle monitor. Stoff's fiancée, Everly Edwards, reassured the court that she was committed to ensuring that he followed any and all of the rules set forth by the court if he were freed. The judge set bail at $300,000 with the requirement that Stoff wear an ankle monitor if he managed to come up with the funds. He would also be required to pay $500 per month for the monitor fees. In the meantime, Stoff turned down a plea deal and took the case to trial. In 2023, a jury convicted 56-year-old Stoff of first-degree murder, which carries an automatic sentence of life without parole in the state of Florida, and he's currently serving his time at a correctional facility in Orlando. In October 1970, a seemingly ordinary autumn evening in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, transformed into the beginning of a decades-long mystery. Pamela Lynn Conyers, a 16-year-old student at Glen Burnie High School, became the central figure in a perplexing case that would baffle and haunt her community for over 50 years. Now, on that fateful night, Pamela attended a pep rally at her high school, a routine event in the life of a teenager. But the normalcy shattered when she failed to return home after borrowing her family's car for a trip to the Arundel Plaza shopping center. The ensuing hours turned to days, and a deepening sense of dread settled over the community. The discovery of Pamela's abandoned vehicle in a secluded wooded area added a chilling twist to her disappearance, because near the car a more harrowing find awaited the authorities, one that would cement this case in the annals of unsolved mysteries. As the days turned into weeks and months, Pamela's case became a focal point for investigators and the source of endless speculation and sorrow for those who knew her. The investigation into Pamela Conyers' disappearance and the grim discovery that followed unfolded like a complex puzzle, with pieces that seemed to defy assembly. The questions outnumbered the answers. Who was responsible for this heinous act? What were the circumstances leading to her untimely death? And most hauntingly, why did it happen to Pamela? As years stretched into decades, the case of Pamela Lynn Conyers remained stubbornly unsolved. A cold case in the truest sense. It became not just a story of a crime, but a narrative woven into the fabric of a community. A reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring quest for truth and justice in the face of tragedy. The disappearance of Pamela Lynn Conyers in October 1970 is a case that's shrouded in mystery and marked by a series of unsettling events and unanswered questions. Pamela, a 16-year-old high school student, vanished after attending a pep rally at Glen Burnie High School. Her last known action was driving to the Arundel Plaza shopping center, which was a seemingly ordinary errand that would culminate in a tragic end. On the night of her disappearance, Pamela's parents reported her missing when she failed to return home. The community's collective anxiety escalated over the following days as search efforts intensified. Pamela was last seen on the night of October the 16th, 1970, after she drove to a local mall to buy shoe polish for a dance that was the next day. Her car was found 3 days later, and her body was discovered the following day in a wooded area near the car. 4 days later, the grim reality came to light. She was found clothed, but her underwear and purse were missing, indicating a violent encounter. Pamela's body was found in a wooded area of Anne Arundel County, not far from the family car she had been driving. She had been strangled to death, a finding that was later confirmed by Maryland's chief medical examiner. The immediate aftermath of the discovery was filled with a mix of shock, grief, and a desperate need for answers. Classmate Mike Golden described the profound impact of Pamela's disappearance, saying, "I remember distinctly when Pam went missing. I remember that Monday morning. I had trigonometry class with her, and seeing her empty desk really brought it home. It made it real. I still mourn her death. She's forever 16. Investigators faced a daunting task. The evidence that was collected from the scene, although significant, offered no immediate leads. In an era before advanced forensic technology, detectives were limited in their ability to extract conclusive information from the available clues. The case thus quickly grew cold, leaving Pamela's family and the community without closure. During the initial investigation, authorities collected evidence from the crime scene, but they lacked the advanced forensic technology that would later become crucial in solving such cases. As FBI Special Agent in Charge, Tom Sobocinski explained, DNA analysis didn't exist in 1970, which meant that even though evidence was collected, it couldn't be analyzed with the precision or depth that modern science allows. This limitation significantly hindered the investigation and contributed to the case remaining unsolved for so long. Now, years turned into decades, and the mystery of Pamela Conyers' murder lingered. The lack of evidence linking any suspects to the crime, coupled with the limitations of investigative techniques of the time, contributed to the case's enduring status as being unsolved. It wasn't until the advent of DNA analysis and investigative genetic genealogy technologies that didn't exist in the 70s that investigators could revisit the case with new tools at their disposal. As the case remained open, the absence of closure continued to weigh heavily on those who knew Pamela. During the decades that Pamela Conyers' case remained cold, the investigation faced significant challenges. Due to the technological limitations of the time, in the years following her disappearance and murder, the case saw little progress, primarily because the tools needed to analyze the evidence effectively didn't exist. So, how did the case with such a tragic beginning and so many unanswered questions find its way towards a resolution after over 50 years? Pamela's case was one of 82 cold cases in Anne Arundel County at the time. The murder occurred in the same area where another young woman, Joyce Malecki, was last seen before her unsolved murder in 1969. The lack of a breakthrough in either case, despite their similarities and geographic proximity, added to the complexity and frustration surrounding Pamela's case. Pamela Lynn Conyers' cold case breakthrough came more than 52 years after her tragic murder in 1970 through a combination of DNA analysis and investigative genetic genealogy. In 1970, when Conyers was brutally murdered, the police collected evidence from the crime scene, but the tools to analyze it comprehensively didn't exist. So for decades, this evidence lay dormant, unable to yield the secrets it held. But this all changed with the advent of DNA analysis and investigative genetic genealogies. Tom Sobocinski, FBI Special Agent in Charge, highlighted the evolution of these tools. The techniques, both scientific and investigative, used to solve her murder have evolved. This technique gives the FBI a chance to solve cases that would not have been solved in any other way. Using these advanced methods, detectives developed a DNA profile from the crime scene evidence and compared it to publicly accessible genealogical databases. This allowed them to identify potential relatives of the suspect, create a family tree, and ultimately pinpoint Forrest Clyde Williams III as the perpetrator. While specific details on how the DNA led to Williams were not disclosed, the process demonstrated how evolving technology could unlock answers in seemingly unsolvable cases. Williams, who was 21 at the time of Conyers' murder, had a sparse criminal history and spent most of his life in Virginia. He'd been arrested a few times in Anne Arundel County in the early 70s for minor offenses, including drunk and disorderly conduct. Unfortunately, Williams passed away in 2018, making it impossible to bring him to justice. Anne Arundel County Police Chief Amal Awad stated, if he was still alive, he would have been charged with the murder of Pamela Conyers. The revelation of Williams as the murderer brought mixed emotions. Classmate Michael Golden expressed both relief and frustration. It's still frustrating because I don't know anything about this guy. It's something all of our classmates have been grappling with for all these years. Despite the identification of Williams, the police have not ruled out the possibility of other suspects being involved in Conyers' murder. The resolution of Pamela Lynn Conyers' case over 5 decades after her tragic murder marks a significant moment in the annals of criminal investigation. The use of advanced DNA technology and investigative genetic genealogy brought closure to a case that had long remained an enigma, offering some semblance of solace to those affected by the tragedy. Anne Arundel County Police Chief Amal Awad, reflecting on this achievement, stated,
"To the family and loved ones of Pamela, we hope that today's announcement brings at least some degree of comfort and peace in finally learning who was responsible for her murder. Pamela was never forgotten, nor will she ever be forgotten."
And that sentiment underscores the commitment of law enforcement to pursue justice, irrespective of the time elapsed. The breakthrough in the case came with the identification of Forrest Clyde Williams as the perpetrator, a revelation that brought mixed emotions. While it provided answers, it also raised new questions, especially since Williams had passed away in 2018, precluding any possibility of his prosecution. The inability to bring Williams to trial leaves a gap in the full closure of the case. For those who knew Pamela, like her classmate, Michael Golden, the resolution brought both a sense of closure and a renewed sense of loss. Despite the identification of the killer, the mystery surrounding Williams and his motives continue to linger in the minds of Pamela's classmates and the community. But this case serves to highlight the significant advancements in forensic science and the impact of these technologies on solving cold cases. FBI agent Tom Sobocinski's statement reflects this progress. Cases may grow cold, investigators may change, but this proves that for law enforcement, victims are never forgotten. This breakthrough has not only brought some degree of closure to Pamela's family and friends, but also it stands as a beacon of hope for other cold cases, demonstrating that justice, though sometimes delayed, is always a pursuit worth undertaking. In conclusion, the resolution of Pamela Lynn Conyers' murder case is a bittersweet mix of justice served and questions unanswered. It brings some small measure of closure to her family and friends and serves as a testament to the perseverance and the dedication of law enforcement in the pursuit of truth and justice, no matter how long it takes. In the quiet, verdant expanses of northern Kentucky, on June the 4th, 1976, it began like any other summer day. But amidst this serene backdrop, a harrowing crime unfolded that would haunt the community for decades. The year 1966 in Boone County, Kentucky, marked a time of innocence for many. But it was also the year that innocence was shattered for the Klaber family. Carol Sue Klaber, a 16-year-old with dreams as wide as the Kentucky skies, was brutally murdered. Her case growing colder as the years stretched on. It would take over 4 decades, the advent of DNA technology, and the unwavering dedication of law enforcement to finally shed light on the darkness of that fateful day. On June the 4th, 1976, in the picturesque environment of northern Kentucky, a seemingly ordinary day transformed into a pivotal moment in the life of the Park Hills community. Carol Sue Klaber, a 16-year-old teenager embarked on a routine bike ride through the tranquil paths of DeVoe Park, unaware that this would be her last. The day, etched in the collective memory of the town, began like any other. But as the hours passed, a sense of unease permeated the Klaber household. Carol, known for her punctuality and responsible nature, did not return home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, worry turned into panic. The local authorities were alerted, and a search ensued. Witnesses came forward with a critical piece of information. Carol had been seen getting into a white car, either a Chevrolet or a Pontiac, in the park. This car, driven by an unidentified male, was the last place Carol was seen alive. The community rallied, with neighbors and friends joining the search, but the night yielded no trace of Carol. The following day, June the 5th, brought a grim discovery. Carol's body was found in a roadside ditch near Walton, Kentucky, a mere short distance from where she was last seen. A dentist, passing by the area, stumbled upon the scene and immediately reported it to the authorities. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, turning the missing persons case into a homicide investigation. The Kentucky State Police took charge, examining the site where Carol was found, hoping to piece together the final moments of her life. The autopsy revealed heart-wrenching details. Carol had been subjected to sexual assault, strangled, and ultimately succumbed to blunt force trauma. This heinous crime, perpetrated against a young and vibrant life, left the community grieved. The Klaber family, engulfed in grief, struggled to comprehend the brutality of the act. Friends and neighbors mourned, remembering Carol as a joyful, music-loving teenager whose absence left a void that could never be filled. The investigation into Carol's disappearance and murder initially seemed quite promising, with leads and potential suspects. However, as days turned into months and months into years, the case gradually grew cold. The lack of conclusive evidence, coupled with the passing of time, buried the case under layers of unresolved mystery. Carol's disappearance and tragic death remained an open wound in the heart of the community, a very poignant reminder of a life that was cut short, and the family's enduring quest for justice. In the immediate aftermath of Carol's death, the Kentucky State Police launched an extensive investigation. Witnesses' accounts and the forensic evidence collected at the crime scene, including DNA and fingerprints, initially seemed promising. However, the trail soon went cold. The initial leads and suspects, upon deeper investigation, provided no concrete connection to the crime. As years passed, the lack of technological advancement in forensic science and the diminishing of new leads contributed to the case's dormancy. The DNA and fingerprints collected, though crucial, would not be fully utilized due to the limitations of forensic technology at the time. Carol's brother, Thomas Klaber, found himself in a relentless pursuit of justice for his sister. The image of identifying Carol's body was etched permanent in his mind, fueling his determination. He frequently contacted law enforcement, urging them to keep the investigation alive. Thomas relentlessly pushed for a re-examination of the evidence, hoping that at some point advancements in forensic technology might just shed some new light on the case. But despite his efforts, the case remained in the shadows, with the years soon turning into decades without any significant progress. Anniversaries of Carol's death were commemorated with vigils where townsfolk would gather, candles flickering against the encroaching darkness, a symbol of the light of Carol's life that was so brutally extinguished. Her classmates graduated, they married, started families of their own, all the while carrying the burden of the question, who killed Carol Sue Klaber? Throughout the years, the case saw occasional revisits by detectives, each hoping to uncover something missed by their predecessors. Yet, each review concluded similarly, with no new leads or suspects. The case exemplified the challenges law enforcement faced with cold cases: limited resources, evolving personnel, and the constant influx of new cases taking precedence over older, unsolved mysteries. The technological limitations of the era played a significant role in the case remaining unsolved. Forensic science in the 1970s and 1980s was by no means as advanced as it is today, particularly in DNA profiling and analysis. The evidence collected from Carol's murder scene held potential clues, but the capability to extract definitive information from such evidence was years away. This gap in technological capability meant that despite the evidence in hand, the authorities could not pinpoint the perpetrator. Now, after languishing in the annals of unsolved mysteries for nearly half a century, the Carol Sue Klaber case experienced a remarkable breakthrough, exemplifying the profound impact of advancements in forensic science and dogged investigative persistence. The pivotal moment in this protracted mystery came in 2017 with the establishment of the Boone County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit. Detectives Coy Cox and Tim Adams, assigned to the unit, reopened Carol's case, bringing new perspectives and technological tools to the decades-old investigation. The detectives still faced a daunting task: sifting through old evidence, re-examining witness statements, and leveraging modern forensic techniques that were unavailable during the initial investigation. But the game changer in the case was the advancements in DNA analysis technology. Forensic science had progressed significantly since 1976, particularly in the field of genetic genealogy. The Cold Case Unit decided to utilize these advancements to reanalyze the DNA evidence collected from the crime scene. And the key piece of evidence was a DNA sample that had been preserved but couldn't be fully analyzed with the technology available in the 1970s and 1980s. This breakthrough came when this DNA sample was sent to Orthram Inc., which is a specialized forensic lab in Houston. In September 2022, using forensic-grade genome sequencing, Orthram Lab was able to construct a detailed DNA profile of the suspect. This cutting-edge technique allowed for a more comprehensive analysis of the genetic material than had ever been possible. Orthram's in-house genealogy team employed genetic genealogy to develop investigative leads. This method involves creating family trees based on DNA profiles, enabling detectives to trace genetic connections and identify potential suspects. And in January of 2023, Orthram contacted the Boone County Sheriff's Office with a crucial recommendation to compare the DNA profile against a specific family's genetic material for potential matches. And it was this recommendation that led detectives directly to Thomas W. Dunaway, a then 19-year-old resident of Park Hills, Kentucky, where Carol's family lived. Dunaway had been overlooked in the initial investigation. He had owned a 1973 Chevrolet Monte Carlo, similar to the vehicle witnesses described seeing Carol enter. This convergence of circumstantial and DNA evidence solidified Dunaway as the prime suspect. Dunaway's history further corroborated his likelihood of being the perpetrator. He had enlisted in the army shortly after Carol's murder, but later deserted. He was later convicted of another murder, reinforcing his violent predispositions. Unfortunately, Dunaway passed away in 1990, precluding the possibility of his arrest and trial for Carol's murder. Despite this, the identification of Dunaway as the perpetrator brought some measure of closure to a case that had long seemed hopeless.
The case of Carol Sue Klaber now closed after nearly 46 years.
The success in solving Carol's murder underscores the importance of revisiting cold cases with new technologies and perspectives, demonstrating that even the coldest cases can be solved and bring in long-delayed justice and closure to families and communities. The detectives found the truth hiding in plain sight a mere 1.5 miles from where Carol lived. Dunaway had been a shadow in the background of Carol's life. A ghost from her past that returned with deadly consequences. In a bittersweet twist of fate, Dunaway was no longer alive to face justice for his crime, having died in 1990. Yet in a final act of investigative determination, his remains were exhumed and his DNA was confirmed to match the evidence from Carol's case. This act not only served to close the chapter on Carol's murder, but also opened the possibility of resolving other cold cases, cementing the legacy of a case that had once seemed doomed to obscurity. The resolution of Carol Sue Klaber's murder case nearly 5 decades after her tragic death stands as a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice, the remarkable evolution of forensic science. The case, which had haunted the Park Hills community in northern Kentucky for years, finally reached its denouement through a combination of advanced forensic technology and the unwavering dedication of law enforcement officers. This case's conclusion brings to light several crucial aspects of criminal investigations and the judicial system. First and foremost, it underscores the importance of perseverance in solving cold cases. Detectives Coy Cox and Tim Adams, along with their colleagues in the Boone County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit, exemplified this commitment. Their decision to revisit the case, to dig through the layers of time and dust, and to apply modern forensic techniques was pivotal in unmasking the perpetrator. The use of genetic genealogy in this case highlights a significant advancement in crime-solving methodologies. The technique, which involves the construction of family trees using DNA profiles, has revolutionized how cold cases are approached. In Carol's case, it allowed detectives to build a genetic profile of the suspect, leading them to Thomas W. Dunaway, who for years had remained outside the sphere of suspicion. The ability to link DNA from decades-old evidence to a specific individual is a powerful tool that has opened new doors in the field of criminal justice. Carol's case also brings into focus the emotional journey of the families involved in such tragedies. For Carol's brother, Thomas Klaber, the resolution was bittersweet. While he expressed a sense of relief that the mystery of his sister's death had finally been solved, there was also a profound sense of grief and frustration. Dunaway's death in 1990 meant that he would never stand trial for Carol's murder, denying the family a certain degree of closure that the trial might have provided. Furthermore, the case demonstrates the ever-evolving nature of forensic science and its critical role in the judicial process. The evidence, which had remained inconclusive for years, was re-evaluated with new technology, leading to a breakthrough that had seemed impossible for decades. This advancement not only brings hope to other families waiting for answers in similar cold cases, but it also serves as a reminder of the need for continued investment in forensic science. The resolution of the Carol Sue Klaber case is a poignant reminder of the unsolved mysteries that still linger in communities across the world. It encourages law enforcement agencies to revisit unsolved cases with new tools and new perspectives. The case also serves as a sobering reminder of the impact of violent crime on families and communities, leaving scars that can take decades to heal, sometimes never fully. In conclusion, while justice in the Carol Sue Klaber case came many years after the crime, it did bring a measure of closure to a long-standing mystery, and it stands as a beacon of hope for other unsolved cases, proving that with determination and the application of modern science, the truth can eventually be uncovered, no matter how much time has passed.